Welcome to the 2021 Niagara Economic Summit. On behalf of our board, my colleagues and the greater business community, thank you for joining us to chart a path of a more resilient future jointly and urgently, and to determine the decisions and commitments needed to ensure a business-led recovery. We have gathered on treaty land, steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. We stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. We are at a pivotal moment in time. We are living in an era of dramatic change that offers both challenges and opportunities, unprecedented in history. Every organization, including governments, non-profits and businesses, must adapt to new challenges. It means that we must navigate new realities, where the role of technology and competition changes daily, where the certainty of supply chains and markets is transforming, and while every business truly functions on the strengths of their employees, our economy is faced with a talent shortage. The topics for today's summits are based on your feedback, a reflection of conversations with businesses of every size and sector, topics you identify as being critical in building a vibrant economy. You asked foremost about Niagara's competitiveness. Our first panel of experts will convene to discuss our place in the bigger picture and how Niagara can position itself to move forward in the 2020s. You clearly mentioned that with the energy that you have placed into your business, into your career, and by calling Niagara your home, that you are in it for the long game. Our second panel will look at the long-term opportunities and challenges that face Niagara, and equally importantly, ways to address both. And following that, experts explore the question about our ethical future. How will this pandemic change how we live, how we work, and how our municipalities will function? How will it reshape our collective values and priorities across Niagara? These questions and more will be tackled this morning. Big thinkers will attempt to identify where Niagara needs to go and how it will get there, and we count on all of you to be one of them. With more than 20 speakers, moderators and panelists, and with over 300 participants connecting to this event right now, we are eager to hear from all of you so that we can improve that which needs to change. We rely on people like you, progressive thinkers in business, academia, and economic development, to collaborate and formulate a blueprint that will lay out a clear directive for achieving a stronger and more robust region. For Niagara to be at its economic and social best, we must always ask how we can do better. We've achieved much in Niagara, we must also look forward. My personal hope is that you will feel inspired and energized by the summit, as I know we at the GNCC will be. And we want to hear from you. Please utilize the chat link on your screen for comments and questions. You can easily log into the chat link with your email, Facebook, or Twitter account, and we will monitor on our end the questions and comments that are coming forward, and we will pass them on to the moderators. To those of you active on social media, and we'd like you to be active on social media, our hashtag is NES2021. For tech questions, look for a button on your screen that says Contact Us. And for questions related to transcript functions, click the accessibility link. And lastly, there is a button called Program that has a complete agenda for this morning and speakers information as well. Same as in past years, discussions won't stop at noon today. Each year, we have made a commitment to you to take the suggestions and opportunities that were identified at past summits to the next level. This past year, a significant portion of our advocacy efforts were focused on simply supporting businesses through this pandemic. Some of those included extending the CEBA loans, grants, and subsidies, launching the distribution of rapid testing kits to ensure that you and your staff are safe. We called for plans related to the border reopening and returning to pre-pandemic capacity limits and lifting restrictions for operations so that you can function again at 100% capacity. We've asked for the reduction of red tape to ensure that business-led recovery will take place, and for the removal of interprovincial barriers and the revitalization of trade relationships and developing new ones. We put out a call to the government to ensure that diversity in government suppliers is in place to enable small businesses like yours to compete for provincial contracts. And the list is longer than this. But for the longer term, advocacy includes a comprehensive reform of the Canadian tax system, promoting tourism to reinstate the visitor rebate program, repealing new taxes on alcoholic beverages, and removing tax barriers to keeping family business in the family. We are faced with key trends and topics that define us, and they include labor shortages and rapidly increasing inflation, anticipated population growth for our region, a housing affordability and availability, and the issue of employment versus residential lands. Some sectors felt less effects from the pandemic, whereas others are still far from recovery, and that specifically impacts our region. Tourism and hospitality was highly affected, and retail depended a lot on the nature of the business. And food service and beverage industry is only slowly recovering. There is so much learning that has taken place in these past 20 months, but one is paramount. We can't work in isolation, and we are better together. And on that note, it is our honor to recognize our community partners making this summit today possible. The Niagara Region Economic Development, Goodman School of Business at Brock University, RBC, Niagara College, Hatch, Deloitte, KPMG, BDC, Innovate Niagara, TD, Meridian Credit Union, National Bank Financial, Lancaster Brooks and Welch, Verge Insurance, Niagara 2022 Canada Games, and Move 105.7 Newstalk 610 CKTB. And a very special thanks to Niagara College's broadcasting, radio, television, and film team of students, faculty, and alumni for producing today's live stream event. Let us get started with remarks from four very distinguished and well-known guests. Regional Chair Jim Bradley, who has been serving St. Catharines and Niagara since 1970, first as a city councillor and then as a member of the provincial parliament for over 40 years, where he served as a minister in the cabinets of 3 premiers of Ontario. In 2018, he accepted his current role as Niagara Regional Chair. Following his remarks, we are joined by Dr. Lynn Wells, who was appointed Provost and Vice President Academic at Brock in July of 2020 and is currently serving as Interim President and Vice Chancellor. Bringing remarks on behalf of Niagara College is President Sean Kennedy, selected as the college's 6th president who assumed his role early on in 2020. He is one of Canada's most experienced post-secondary leaders with over 20 years of experience in the post-secondary sector. And completing our opening statements, we will hear from the 26th and current Premier of Ontario, the Honourable Doug Ford, who assumed office in 2018.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Regional Council, I'm pleased to be here with all of you today to welcome you to the 2021 Niagara Economic Summit. In attendance today are prominent business leaders from every industry and sector and from all corners of the region. It is heartening to see such broad commitment to Niagara's economy. The work you do every day helps ensure we are being as successful as possible. As you know, the main theme of today's event is building a more resilient future. As we're now starting to see the end of the pandemic, I believe it is time for all of us to start having conversations about recovery, the future, and what our new normal could look like. In reviewing today's agenda, I found the forum topics that will be discussed to be compelling and fitting for the time in which we find ourselves. First, I would like to reflect on the notion of our competitiveness. While we would all agree that the pandemic has been exceptionally disrupting, it has also allowed us to do what we otherwise would have taken years to do in just a few weeks or months. COVID-19 has allowed us to redefine what work looks like, how it is done, and where it is done. In the past, to attract the best and brightest, you would need to have an address in Toronto, Montreal, or Vancouver. Now, businesses have successfully proven that their workforce can be remote and still highly productive and successful. When thinking about our competitiveness, I believe there is also an opportunity to learn from changes in buying patterns, consumer demand, and the value of goods and services. The people at this forum are all experts in their businesses, and I'm confident that Niagara's business leaders are contemplating ways to leverage some of the transformational changes that have occurred over the past 20 months and capitalize on the new normal. Second, I'm encouraged to see that we'll be discussing the long game. I can fully appreciate that much of our attention needs to be in the moment and focused on immediate tasks at hand. But I think many of us can agree that we cannot continue to just do what we were doing before. We must also focus on the long-term challenges and opportunities that are before us. In government, we are evaluating many of our current policies and practices, looking ahead to the future. Yes, we acknowledge there are many current barriers that exist, which prevent us from capitalizing on the opportunities of the future. But I know that Niagara's business leaders are creative, tenacious, and resolute in their efforts to skate to where the puck is going. Finally, if the last year and a half was defined by two things, it would be the pandemic and our heightened collective awareness of social justice across our communities. Your customers, just as it is with our residents, are more focused than ever on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. They are concerned about the environment, about climate change, and about the future we are leaving for future generations. We're also rightly more focused on issues of reconciliation than in the past, and we're more acutely aware of the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on women. These conversations are not easy, but they are important. I believe that we all have been given an opportunity for deeper reflection. In many ways, the pandemic has provided us the chance to rethink what normal could look like, and an opportunity to build not just an economy, but a society that works better for everyone. I look forward to hearing the discussion on this important topic as we're all learning from one another and building the future together. In closing, I want to thank all of you for your commitment to Niagara. While we no doubt have our challenges, there are many things for which we should be optimistic. It's going to take all of us collaborating closely and working together to ensure that everyone can succeed. My hope is that we all find today's summit to be productive and beneficial as we work towards building a more resilient economy and a more resilient community. Thank you and enjoy the conference.
Hello everyone. I'm pleased to welcome you to the 2021 Niagara Economic Summit. My name is Lynn Wells and I am the interim president of Brock University. As we continue to gather virtually for events like these, we look forward to a day very soon when we can once again gather in person. I would like to thank the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce for continuing to host the Niagara Economic Summit. This meeting plays an important role in bringing together individuals and organizations from across the region as we work together to emerge from this pandemic strong, united, and thinking ahead to the future of our Niagara region. Brock knows that engaging with businesses, organizations, and partners throughout the region will be key to our shared economic recovery and the future competitiveness of the region. We recognize the role that Brock plays in helping move Niagara forward, and we are committed to supporting the Niagara community's cultural, economic, and social well-being. We work together with you and for you to contribute to the quality of living and well-being of Niagara communities. When one of us thrives, we all thrive. Brock has always played a role in responding to community needs before the pandemic, and we have plans to support in new ways as we emerge from the pandemic. Some of these plans include developing a new professional and continuing studies operation dedicated to continuing education and career upskilling, reskilling, and advancement opportunities that will support Niagara's workforce and economic vitality. Growing our nursing program to support increased demand from our local healthcare sector, and building new academic programming related to engineering, which will train minds to advance the technical base of Niagara's workforce in innovative ways. Our researchers and scholars also work alongside local industries, government, and agencies to seek ways to improve our personal well-being, as well as our economic health. Some of this research in the social sciences includes research on the need for childcare as a critical component of the economic recovery. Research through our Niagara Community Observatory on remote work and its role in supporting a stable workforce post-pandemic, and research through the Center for Lifespan Development on the impact of the pandemic on children's mental health. Brock also prides itself on its ability to share its research with local industry in ways that further technological and economic objectives. Some examples include partnering with Biolese Pharma Corporation to create a quercetin product to be used in the fight against COVID-19, working with CanBud to explore whether a particular type of fungus can act as a natural fertilizer for the hemp plant, and partnering with Peller Estates Winery to use a novel prototype technology that traps specific compounds released during the winemaking process and returning them into the wine, supplying a growing market for highly aromatic white, rosé, and sparkling wines across Ontario. Brock is a national leader in co-op and experiential learning opportunities. Our students participate in Niagara's firms and organizations, gaining valuable workplace experience while contributing their knowledge to our community partners. With labor shortages and an incredible demand for student talent, the university is here to partner with industry to improve access to the talent pipeline. Brock's Co-op Career and Experiential Education Office is working with various organizations on integrated on-campus talent partnerships. We launched Brock's Got Talent last year to showcase student talent during the pandemic, inviting employers onto campus to meet with students. We experienced growth in our experiential education offerings through the pandemic, as our local partners faced new challenges and sought help to address them. Students in the Goodman School of Business's Information Systems course are working with community partners to create simple mobile applications that assist with the shift to the online space. This has come in the form of web development, e-commerce creation, and redesign of information systems, saving businesses money and helping them to adapt to the changing landscape. Brock continues to support local industry, such as the local grape and wine sector, through our Cool Climate Enology and Viticulture Institute, also known as COVE. Throughout the pandemic, COVE donated wine to Dillon's Distillery to make hand sanitizer. COVE has continued to offer analytical services to the grape and wine sector, such as the grapevine virus testing services. COVE has also shifted its continuing education to virtual programming to allow professional development to continue throughout the pandemic. With a strategic imperative to enhance the vitality of our community, we continue to engage and partner with key allies in the region to better serve community needs. We work with healthcare providers and social agencies, such as our partners at Niagara Region Public Health, Niagara Health System, and Pathstone Mental Health to improve both physical and mental health outcomes for residents of Niagara. We partner with the Niagara Workforce Planning Board to understand Brock's economic impact on and in the region, and to collaborate on the future of work to support employers and employees. We also collaborate with Community Care of St. Catharines and Thorold to support evidence-based programming and connecting students with experiential learning opportunities. Niagara's Economic Summit helps to provide a forum for all of us to connect and learn from each other about how we can best move forward from the unique and disruptive time through which we have lived. At Brock, we look forward to collaborating with local industry and organizations further to build a stronger and more vibrant Niagara. On behalf of the entire Brock University community, I welcome and thank you for your involvement in the Niagara Economic Summit. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sean Kennedy, President of Niagara College. On behalf of our students, faculty, and staff, I'm very pleased to welcome you to the 2021 Niagara Economic Summit. This summit series creates opportunity for important discussions that help shape our community and move us forward together. I'd like to thank the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce for hosting this annual summit as we set our sights on Niagara's economic recovery and a prosperous future. Over the last year and a half, Niagara's business, education, and community leaders and organizations have demonstrated unwavering passion, resilience, and innovation. It hasn't been easy, and while we know there will be challenges on the road ahead, there is also great reason for optimism and a world of opportunity. At Niagara College, we continue to adapt to the current realities while positioning ourselves to play a significant role in the recovery period that lies ahead. We know that our community relies on us for highly skilled and knowledgeable graduates who drive key sectors of our economy, and for expertise and innovation through our many applied research activities. We remain committed to being a key partner for business and industry across Niagara. Niagara College continues to be a leader in the Canadian college system in securing significant research funding. Every year, we leverage this funding to facilitate thousands of student experiences in applied research, while helping businesses and industry partners across Niagara achieve their innovation and new product development goals. As Niagara positions itself to be competitive in a post-COVID world, we are here to help Niagara's key industries explore emerging opportunities, tackle existing barriers, and take on new challenges. Thank you for lending your time and voice to these important sessions, and best wishes for a very fruitful and productive discussion.
Hi, it's an absolute pleasure to bring greetings to everyone attending this year's Niagara Economic Summit. The pandemic continues to challenge us in ways previously unimaginable. I'm truly inspired by how Team Ontario has stepped up and shown the true strength and resilience of this great province. I want to take this opportunity to thank all the businesses in the Niagara region for your hard work, dedication, and steadfast leadership over the past 18 months. While we still have some ways to go, our government remains fully committed to an economic and fiscal recovery fueled by economic growth, not painful tax hikes or spending cuts. I look forward to continuing working together to make Ontario the best place in the world to invest and do business. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you. Now it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Madeleine Woodhead with National Bank Financial to introduce our keynote speaker on the topic of Niagara's competitiveness. Ms. Woodhead has over 35 years' experience in the financial services industry. Additionally, she is a designated personal financial planner and works closely with clients to identify the strategies and opportunities that best meet their unique financial objectives. Married with 2 grown children, Madeleine has an extensive background in community involvement and is currently on the board of Hotel du Chevre Hospital and the Community Leadership Committee of the Niagara Community Foundation. Over to you.
Good morning. I'm Madeline Woodhead, Wealth Advisor with Forrest Woodhead Wealth Management at National Bank Financial Wealth Management. We're pleased to be a sponsor of this year's Niagara Economic Summit and thrilled to be with you all this morning. At Forrest Woodhead, our mission is to grow and protect our clients' wealth from generation to generation. We utilize a process that assists clients in clarifying their financial goals, identifying strategies most suitable for them and their families, and providing personalized advice to meet their evolving needs, achieve their goals, and have positive impact in their lives. This morning, I am pleased to introduce our speaker, Mr. Pierre Cleroux, Vice President, Research and Chief Economist at BDC. Pierre was appointed Vice President, Research and Chief Economist at BDC in 2012. Pierre leads a team of experts who analyze economic data to identify business and sector trends impacting Canadian entrepreneurs. A seasoned speaker, he regularly travels across the country to help business owners understand the risks and opportunities presented by the economic environment. Mr. Cleroux is also responsible for providing economic analysis and advice to the bank's senior management team and supervises all marketing and industry research activities. Over his 25 years as an economist, he has held several influential positions that had a direct impact on entrepreneurs in Canada and abroad. Before joining BDC, Pierre worked for the government of Saudi Arabia as Vice President, Business Analyst in the National Industry Clusters Development Program. His role was to create program structures, define sector policies, and conduct financial and economic analysis of industrial projects. Previously, Mr. Cleroux was Quebec Assistant Deputy Minister for Economic Development, Innovation, and Export Trade, responsible for the implementation of economic policies and programs to support small and medium-sized businesses and encourage entrepreneurship. He was also strategic advisor for Montreal International, where he was responsible for attracting foreign investment from India and the Middle East and developing international relationships and strategy. He worked for 12 years at the Canadian Federation of Independent Business in various roles, including economist and Quebec vice president. He holds a Bachelor of Arts and a master's degree in economics from Laval University, as well as an MBA from MIT Sloan School of Management. Please welcome, je vous présente, Pierre Cleroux.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to share my screen I have a presentation about the economy. So let me share my screen a little bit. So my presentation has two parts. First, I'm going to talk about the Canadian and the Ontario economic outlook. Second, I'm going to talk briefly about the shortage of labor. So first, let's talk about the economy. This is where we are in terms of the recovery. As you can see, in 2020, we had a huge decline of the Canadian economy because of the pandemic. The rebound has been very strong, but since the rebound or the recovery has been a bit more slow. And the surprise for most economists was the second quarter of 2021, where we had basically a negative growth, a small negative growth, but nevertheless a negative growth. Actually, the third wave of the virus slowed down the economy a bit more than what we thought. But in the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about why we believe that the economy will continue to grow for the rest of the year and also for 2022. The good news is in terms of jobs, we have recuperated all the job loss during the pandemic. In Canada, we lost more than 3 million jobs, and in September 2021, we were back to the pre-crisis level. What is interesting on this graph, you can see that during every wave, we're losing jobs, actually thousands of jobs, but at the same time, as we move away from the beginning of the pandemic, you can see that the impact is diminishing. Actually, we are in the middle of the fourth wave now, and the number of jobs in Canada is still increasing. And the reason is our level of vaccination has been really increasing in Canada. We are at 74% of all Canadians has been fully vaccinated. This is the highest level among developed economies. So we're doing much better than the United States, for example. So where is growth going to come in the next 2 years? Well, it's going to come from three different actors. The first one are consumers, and consumers are going to be mostly responsible for the growth in the next few years in Canada. The Canadian wealth has been increasing despite the fact that we were in a pandemic over the last 12 or 18 months. As you can see here, this is surprising because during recession, usually our wealth diminished, but that was not the case over the last 12 months. Government program has increased Canadian revenue. The housing market has been very good. So if you own a house, you're richer probably today than 12 months ago. And also the stock market has been performing well. Not only we're richer, but we have more money in our pocket. Canadians save more than $200 billion last year, which is exceptional. Every year we save money, we save about 18 billion. So 200 billion, that's more than a record. There's few reasons for that. Government program help Canadians to put money away. There was a lot of restriction on the economy, so we couldn't spend that money. We couldn't travel, for example. And also during every recession, people save money because of the uncertainty. So that means that Canadians have money in their pocket and also in their bank account, and they are spending it. Consumption of goods in Canada has increased by 4.5%, despite the fact we were in a pandemic. And as you know, the housing market has just exploded. The level of sales has exploded last year. It's slowing down now, but it's still more elevated than before the pandemic. We believe this market will continue to do well in 2022, and prices are going to stay elevated. The second factor why we are optimistic is on the business side. 76% of Canadian businesses are profitable now. However, half of them are saying that they are struggling despite the fact that they are profitable. So it's not easy to do business because of the pandemic. But the good news is more and more businesses are profitable, and it's improving the level of investment that Canadian businesses are doing. So we're not back to the pre-crisis level yet, but every quarter, the level of investment in Canada is increasing, which is a good news. There's a lot of numbers on this graph, but if you look on the red zone, which represent the investment in technology, you can see that we're actually back to the pre-crisis level. A little bit more, actually. So businesses are investing in technology, and despite the fact that the total investment is still below what it was before the pandemic, while investment in technology has been increasing. The final factor is coming from the US. Our Canadian export is totally recovering. We're back to the pre-crisis level. The US economy is performing very well, so Canadian exporters are benefiting from that. So our forecast is a growth of 5.2% for 2021 and a growth for 4% in 2022, which is very solid growth. So we are expecting that the economy will continue to grow, but there's still some issues to solve, like shortage of labor that I'm going to talk about a little bit later, and also supply chain issues. We know that supply chain is a problem for many businesses, and a good example of that is the shortage of chips that is slowing down the automotive sector in Canada and especially in Ontario. So we're not done yet with the pandemic, but as we are moving away from the pandemic, the situation is really improving. The situation now in Ontario, well, it's very close to the one in Canada. We are back to the pre-crisis level. We're a bit higher than the level of job we had before the pandemic. But the situation is quite different from one sector to another. You can see here, in average, we're at 100%, the level of job that we had before the pandemic, but some sectors have been performing very well. That's the case of professional services. They have 15% more jobs today than before the pandemic. Even manufacturing, despite the issues with the supply chain issues, well, the level of jobs is 100%, which means that it's back to the pre-crisis level. If you look at the bottom of the graph, you can see that one sector that is struggling is accommodation and food services. It's only at 90%, the level of job that we had before the crisis. This is not surprising. There was more restrictions on this sector. And despite the fact that restrictions are moving away, well, tourism is not back. And this graph is really showing the numbers. In blue, you have the level of tourists coming from the US. We had in December 2019, more than 600,000 Americans coming to Ontario every month. Now we were down to almost zero, and now we're back to about 100,000. So it's going to take some time before tourism is back. It's going to take probably another 12 months. It's because of the restrictions. Even if the border is open, it's going to take some time before people take the habit to come back to travel. So in summary, both the Ontario and the Canadian economy will continue to grow, but at a more moderate pace than what we were expecting. And most of the issues are related to COVID-19. There's still some restrictions in some sector. In restaurant and accommodation, for example, there's a shortage of labor. Just going to talk about that a bit later. Supply chain issues, price volatility. You have probably noticed that prices are fluctuating a lot. So as we move away from the pandemic, well, these issues should go back to normal. But it's going to take probably another 6 to 12 months before we go back to normal. We're expecting that the Ontario and the Canadian economy will be back in terms of level of economic activities to the pre-crisis level at the beginning of 2022. So we are really on the right way. The worst is behind us, but we're not over yet. It's not done yet. We're not back to normal yet, but it's coming. The last thing I want to talk about is the shortage of labor. As 55% of Ontario businesses have difficulties to find workers. This is not unique to Ontario. We see that across the country. So what's going on? Why it's so difficult? Well, the main reason is the fact that our population is aging. Look at this graph. In 1971, only 8% of people in Ontario were over 65. Now we are at 18%. And in about a decade, we would be at 25%. So think about it, 20% of people are now over 65. So what's happening is the baby boomers are leaving the workplace because they are close to 65 or over 65, so they are retiring. A lot, thousands, tens of thousands of baby boomers are leaving to retire, and there's not enough young people to compensate for this loss. So the result is our labor force or our pool of workers is barely increasing. This graph is really illustrating what's going on. The blue line represents the population of Ontario between 15 and 64. We consider those people our pool of workers. People typically work between the age of 15 and 64. As you can see, over the last 10 years, this curve has increased by actually 9% since over the last 10 years. The red line represents the number of jobs in the province. And as you can see, this line is increasing faster than the pool of workers. So it's actually increased by 16% over the last 10 years. So over the last 10 years, the number of jobs created in Ontario has been growing faster than our pool of workers. That's the reason why before the pandemic, our unemployment rate was low. That's the reason why so many businesses have difficulties to find workers. So the number one reason is the fact that we have an aging population. But over that, the pandemic has amplified the shortage of labor. How? Well, in the best way, or one way, is the fact that because of the restriction, we didn't accept as many immigrants over the last 2 years than we used to. Actually, we're missing about almost 200,000 people in 2020 and 2021. So the situation was already difficult before the pandemic because of our aging population and immigration. The lack of immigration had made things worse over the last 18 months. So there's no easy solution. There's a number of solutions that business can look at. Investing in technology and automation is one of the solutions. One is possible. To have a more formal hiring process, it's another solution to the shortage of labor. You have to have a total compensation package that is competitive. And in many, salaries are increasing in Canada. That's especially the case in accommodation and food services. And finally, we have to look differently at the labor force and to expand our hiring pool, meaning that some group of our society have more difficulties to find a job. That's the case of young people with no experience. That's the case of people who are not born in Canada, and also older people. So as it's getting more and more difficult to recruit, well, it's important to look at our pool of workers differently. So in conclusion, the recovery is well underway, and we are going back to normal soon, probably in the next 6 to 12 months, where the economy will be back to the pre-crisis level. So the worst is behind us. We're really going in the right direction, but it's not over yet. Businesses are still having difficulties with the shortage of labor, some supply chain issues, which is slowing down their growth, and by definition is slowing down the growth of the economy as well. But we are going in the right direction.
Our thanks to Mr. Claureau for his insight. And at this time, we are privileged to be joined by the Honourable Peter Bethlenfalvy, Ontario's Minister of Finance. He was elected as MPP for Pickering-Uxbridge in 2018. Minister Bethlenfalvy is responsible for ensuring Ontario's long-term fiscal sustainability and providing the fiscal firepower needed to protect the health and well-being of Ontarians in the face of COVID-19. Mr. Bethlenfalvy will join us right now. Thank you.
One day, transit will be truly rapid. One day, alternative energy will no longer be the alternative. One day, we will look beyond Earth for valuable minerals. With an engineering partner who delivers more innovative solutions, that day will come sooner. Throughout our storied history, we've embraced our clients' visions as our own. We're chosen to bring them to life because we are custodians of vast knowledge who combine proven technical expertise with the courage to challenge. We are independent, free to bring our best thinking and teams to your business. We constantly seek out and nurture the world's finest minds, extraordinary individuals who keep your long-term success top priority. Teams who act on our long-standing culture of caring through community initiatives. People who push progress in ways you believe are most meaningful. To help you solve your greatest challenges. To help you transform the world. Hatch, building smarter solutions to ignite your vision.
Hello, I'm happy to have the opportunity to address the Niagara Economic Summit. It's a pleasure to speak to you and share some insights about our plan to protect the progress we've made against COVID-19 and build the foundation for recovery and prosperity. I want to begin by thanking everyone tuning in virtually today for everything you've done. Whether you've changed the way you do business to keep people safe, volunteered your time to help those directly impacted by the pandemic, or got vaccinated once you were eligible to do so. Thank you for demonstrating the strength of the Ontario spirit. Since the beginning of the pandemic, our government has been steadfast in our commitment to make every necessary resource available to protect people, to protect jobs, and to lay the foundation for our long-term economic growth and prosperity. We cannot have a healthy economy without healthy people, which is why the best economic policy is one that addresses COVID-19. In March of last year, Ontario was the first jurisdiction in Canada to release a fiscal update that reflected the potential impacts of the virus. Through successive fiscal updates, we continue to make investments to protect people and jobs, bringing Ontario's COVID-19 response to $51 billion, as laid out in the 2021 budget. Included in that number is nearly $3 billion in urgent and unprecedented support to over 110,000 small businesses across the province. 2 days from now, I will release our government's 2021 Ontario Economic Outlook and Fiscal Review. This milestone document, the 7th financial update since the pandemic began, will outline the next step of our government's plan to protect the collective progress we've made in the fight against this pandemic. It will also be a plan that looks to the future, to building a province that is the best place to do business, to work, and to raise a family. Ce document clé fournira une mise à jour sur les projets de notre gouvernement pour continuer à fournir toutes les ressources nécessaires pour combattre la COVID-19, pour que nous puissions protéger les progrès collectifs que nous avons réalisés dans notre lutte contre cette pandémie, tout en mettant en place les conditions qui permettront à notre économie de croître et de prospérer. We're going to build upon our record investments to support frontline workers, invest in healthcare capacity, get more shovels in the ground on highways, hospitals, housing, and high-speed internet, stand for workers who have fallen behind, and fight for everyone in Ontario as we build a stronger, more self-reliant province. Our plan will include measures to support an economic and fiscal recovery fueled by growth. We've come a long way. Every single vaccine brings us one step closer to that light at the end of the tunnel. The focus of each major fiscal update for the past 18 months has been protecting people and protecting jobs. And my role as Minister of Finance is to make sure we continue doing just that. The plan we bring forward this week will be one that protects how far we've come, the qualities that saw our province through the worst days of the pandemic, the spirit of the people of this province. Will see us to a brighter, more prosperous future. Thank you.
And now, to lead our first panel discussion, we are joined by our moderator, Debbie Zimmerman. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Grape Growers of Ontario and served for 2 terms as Regional Chair for the Regional Municipality of Niagara. She is also the past Chair of the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation for the Province of Ontario. In June 2020, she received an honorary doctorate of laws from Brock University in recognition of her leadership in Niagara and as a champion of Ontario's grape and wine industry.
Thank you very much, and good morning. It's wonderful to be here. We've already heard from Pierre Claroux, and we're now going to hear from, I introduced George Spezza, who is a community leader with over 3 decades of experience in the public and private and not-for-profit sectors. As Director of the Economic Development for the Niagara region, George leads and unites efforts across 12 municipalities to build a strong, sustainable regional economy. Prior to this current role, George had a number of positions in Toronto focused on the growth of Canada's largest city. I'd also like to welcome Michael Sutherland, who leads Hatch Urban Solution practice in Canada, collaborating with urban solution teams in the US, UK, South Africa, and other Hatch teams globally. He is a recognized leader in transit-oriented development, TOD, and holds graduate degrees from the University of Toronto and the London School of Economics. Let's begin our discussion this morning. Pierre, Niagara has often trailed provincial averages when it comes to unemployment, income, and economic growth. Does this mean we'll be left behind in an economic recovery? Could you just add some commentary to that, please?
I think it's going to take a little bit more time, not because of that, but because of the sector that is very important for Niagara, which is tourism. Tourism is the last sector to recover for obvious reasons, restrictions at the border. Now the border is open, but it's going to take some time before people get the habit of crossing the border. So that's, we believe it's going to take probably another 6 to 12 months before we go back to normal. But the situation is, like I showed before, the number of tourists coming from the US is slowly increasing, but we are far from being back to normal, and that's the reason why it's going to take a bit more time.
Thank you. Michael and George, I'm going to ask you both this question. In order to create economic growth, we need suitable infrastructure. Does Niagara offer superior infrastructure, and where might we be lacking? I think I could answer this question, but I know you can. Pierre, Michael, why don't you go first? Thank you.
Sure, thanks very much. Niagara's got a couple of really great assets, but it's also regions are changing. COVID has only accelerated some major shifts that were already underway, and I think I guess to make it simple, we can talk about it at two scales. In one scale, you've got this proximity to other major metro areas, principally the Greater Toronto Area, but there are other major metro areas as well, and creating faster, more convenient links. And especially in terms of connecting to Toronto, rail would be the number one mode to connect and get around congestion and also deal with sustainability issues. But the other one is at this much smaller local scale. There's a lot of talk about globally about 15-minute cities. This is a great idea. It's not a new concept, but it's gained a lot of traction. And I think basic things like cycling, amenities, good retail that people can walk to, building complete communities, that's also really important as well. And especially with the shift for many companies and the types of workers that regions want to attract and retain, professional services that can manage a hybrid work schedule with some virtual work, being a really attractive place to live, but being able to still connect with community and also professional opportunities is really important. So that's probably an interesting place to kick it off, is to start at sort of two levels of scale. One is the super regional, which Niagara is definitely a part of, and then the second is the community 15-minute city scale.
George?
Yeah, and I think Niagara offers some exceptional multimodal transportation infrastructure, including the Welland Canal, the St. Lawrence Seaway, 2 regional airports in close proximity to 3 international airports, 4 international bridge crossings, 2 Class A, Class 1 railroads in CP and CN, and we've got 4 major provincial highways that run through the region. So this infrastructure, in my mind, is critical for facilitating trade. And despite the pandemic, Niagara companies have exported over $6 billion in goods and imported over $2.3 billion in goods, which all relied on our trade infrastructure. Over $100 billion of goods go through our border through the US and Canada. And so this represents about 12% of the total trade between the two countries. So we're internationally significant, and the infrastructure allows for this. The Niagara region has also been proactively investing in our water and regional road upgrades throughout the region. And our regional population is forecasted to grow by another 6% over the next 5 years. So we need to make those hard infrastructure investments to facilitate the growth, include private and also to include private and public investment in facilitating the irrigation infrastructure that can help our agricultural sector. So in regards to the lacking infrastructure, I think Niagara could benefit from an integrated public transportation system to get people to and from their place of work and beyond within the region. As Pierre mentioned earlier in his economic update, some of the labor issues are top of mind for many of our businesses, and we need to do more to help that labor force throughout the region, help them be more nimble, and help them get to their jobs easier. Any improvements we can make from provincial and GO Transit linkages around the province also would serve well to help our labor force grow.
Great, thank you. Has the pandemic changed what companies are looking for when shopping for a region to establish themselves in? I'm going to ask Pierre if you'd like to take this first.
Yes, actually, the pandemic have changed a few things. We realized during the pandemic that it's much easier to work from home remotely than before. A lot of businesses have invested in technology to allow their workers to work remotely. And even the perception changed. Before the pandemic, there was not a big appetite for having employees working from home. We were forced to do it, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, and businesses realize that this is a very efficient way to work. So many businesses are looking to work or to establish themselves away from the big center where real estate is very expensive. So I think there's going to be an opportunity for region a little bit further than Toronto to attract businesses, because you can you can work from a remote area now. So I think this is going to be a potential for the region.
George, do you want to tackle that question?
Yeah, sure. So I think that the pandemic hasn't slowed interest in Niagara. There's been a lot of interest for companies locating here, and if anything, the demand continues to grow. We continue to see a high demand of interest in our industrial properties and for industrial space. And over the course of the pandemic, we've had over $140 million in transactions across 70 industrial properties, which is significant. So the interest in the region is there, and as Pierre indicated, I think being able to work remotely and having that opportunity to work from abroad or outside of the region is interesting to be able to attract some of the labor force. And we also received from all different types of building and facilities. There's high demand for greenfield properties, and there's certainly a shortage of new industrial opportunities. So I think collectively we need to tackle this issue of how, we see the demand, but how can we ensure that we have the supply to meet that demand in terms of industrial commercial space?
It's interesting. We have a question from our live audience, and I'm going to give this to you, Pierre. What impact is inflation having on our economy, and what impact will it have on the future?
It's a very good question. There's more inflation right now than before the pandemic. We are 4.4% in Canada. Most of the inflation is related to the pandemic, meaning that there's a shortage of a lot of products because we have supply chain issues. The big example is we have a shortage of chip, which is really affecting the automotive sector, and the price for that product is really increasing. You have probably noticed that the price of lumber has increased significantly last year. It's coming back down now. So the fluctuation in the demand has caused the price to fluctuate as well. As we're moving away from the pandemic, we believe that inflation is going to go down. So we believe that inflation is going to go back to normal around 2% in 2022. So we don't believe it's going to have a huge impact on the Canadian economy. For example, we don't believe it's going to force the central bank to increase interest rate. Interest rate for us are going to remain low until probably the middle of 2022, when we're back to normal and the Bank of Canada start to increase slowly the interest rate. So inflation is there. We believe it's temporary, and I don't believe it's going to have a negative impact on the economy.
Thank you. Michael, your thoughts?
In terms of inflation, I'm going to leave it to Pierre. I'll pick up on a point, though, that George raised about industrial, I think, and land prices. I mean, Southern Ontario, the industrial market is white hot. I mean, there's a real shortage of space. Niagara will have a role, no doubt. I mean, you just look at what's happening in Peel and sort of the areas sort of west, particularly the GTA. And I think that one of the interesting things for Niagara to consider is how does it balance, and it's done this historically, the sometimes competing roles of tourism, residential growth and community building, and some of the industrial requirements. I mean, you just don't want to mix trucks in your prime tourist areas. So how do you manage that? And that takes some really careful spatial planning, and I think some conversations between both public and private sectors to make sure you get that right, because there's a real opportunity. Pierre and George mentioned the edge location, the very close proximity that Niagara has to the GTA, and I think the value of getting that right is really high potentially, especially just given how intense the tourism sector is, the potential for it. My colleague in the UK, Caroline Hayes, has developed a framework called the Global 8, and I'm not going to go through all 8 here, but one of them is the rise of regional tourism. And so again, Niagara with the challenge of, and with both COVID, but also I think people's awareness about sustainability, the pricing of carbon coming in. I mean, large numbers of families jumping on discount airplanes to go to the Caribbean for a weekend is not sustainable. And so, and also people are looking more and more for more sort of considered options that include a combination of heritage, outdoor amenity, other things that connect, and again, being on an airplane for 10 hours or whatever it is to get wherever you need to go is not going to be as popular. So Niagara has an immense opportunity in front of it, and if you can combine the way your tourism amenities combine with some of your amenities that you're trying to create for your new communities, your new residential communities, again, that can be really great. But the whole industrial thing is another wrench that needs to be thought about very carefully, because there's a role for employment and for serving other markets. But if it's not done thoughtfully, they work against each other.
Well, Michael, I'm just going to sort of tag into what you were saying, because the next question I have is very timely in regards to a region like ours that is lagging behind in the area of public transit, for example. This is perhaps a good opportunity to make that leap forward and try to catch up to the other regions. Maybe just give it a half a second think through on that, Michael, and then I'll go to George on the same question. What can we do? Can we move forward? And things like public transit, which we've lagged behind on, might be the opportunity. Your thoughts?
Sure. I think Ontario has embarked on an immense transit program, as many of us know. It's really remarkable what's happened in the last 15 years. I think there's some lessons learned, and again, I won't share them all right here, but I mean, Niagara maybe being a little bit late to the party can avoid some of the pitfalls that other regions or municipalities have gone through in terms of heavy politicization of some decisions. I think we've gotten a lot better in Ontario at bringing evidence and doing good planning work and good homework and just getting on with building large projects. I think the GO Rail extension that Niagara has been talking about and has been getting, slightly improved service. I think Niagara could think a lot more boldly about the level of service that's appropriate for the size of a region that's this proximate to a large urban area. If you go to other developed large city regions, I mean, Niagara would have a lot better rail service than it currently does. And that means faster, more frequent journey times, but also faster journey times. The other thing is, of course, I think really working on development of nodes around the rail stations, and then thinking about those 15-minute cities and the first mile, last mile, and access issues. I think Niagara has done a great job in getting started with a regional transit connecting the various communities. Again, late to the party, but keep building on that. I mean, advanced fare integration, be creative with fare products, think about micromobility. And the future of e-scooters and local shuttles and things like that. There's a lot more modes now to consider. But I think that, there's a good track. And even though Niagara is maybe a little slower out of the gate, it can learn from its neighbors and hopefully deliver faster.
George,
I'm optimistic.
Thank you. George, quick comment?
Yeah, sure. Not much more to add to what Michael said. He's right on the mark. I think, continuing to advocate for those public transportation, the higher order transit, reinforcing development around transit nodes. All those things are going to be really important to making it more of a connected region, allowing, our labor force to move around the region to get to their places of work much easier. So anything we can do to increase all those different types of, it might not just be public transit, but as Michael indicated as well, sort of, bike lanes, transit, getting people around the region is critically important. We have a big geographic region, so getting it connected more easily for everyone is certainly going to help our economic prosperity moving forward.
Thank you. And speaking of infrastructure, how can the border communities better leverage existing infrastructure into economic growth? Pierre, do you want to take a shot at that?
Well, I think what we are seeing is the post-pandemic recovery is going to be a little bit different, much more focusing on technology. Businesses need to invest in technology to have a bigger presence online. This is where consumer is going now. We talked about working remotely, which requests technology. Also, a lot of businesses are investing in technology to reduce their need for workers, because we are going to have a shortage of labor for a while. So anything that the different economic organization can do to help adopt technology, I think would be very important. This is where we're going in Canada. We're going towards using more technology to become more efficient, to be more online, and this is going to be important for the region.
George, your thoughts?
I would just say that, as I mentioned earlier, we're a very strategic location in terms of the amount of goods that go across our borders. And so I think this already makes Niagara a really attractive place for business that really relies on the U.S. market and supply chain opportunities. So, we also have programs and resources at the Niagara Foreign Trade Zone point, which is meant to help facilitate trade in the region. So companies that are looking at wanting to do more exporting have a resource in terms of helping to facilitate some of that trade. We should be looking at other higher value industries, across the border that could benefit from our binational location. So, I think that there's opportunities for new business to provide services that cater to binational markets, such as just-in-time manufacturing, fulfillment and logistics services, and professional services. All of these things, kind of a brokerage services, immigration services. These are the kind of industries that, being a border town, could serve us well in terms of increasing some of those areas of our economy.
Pierre, can you speak to, and you just touched on it, to the scope of the labor shortage that many industries are now seeing, and when or when do we think or we might expect a recovery of that, and will the shortages continue into the future?
Well, unfortunately, this is a long-term issue, and because the base of this, the basic of this issue is related to our aging population. We have a lot of baby boomers who are leaving the workforce to retire or ready to do so. So in the next 5 years, across the country, and Ontario is no exception, millions of baby boomers are going to leave the workforce. So unfortunately, there's no quick fix. It's going to take probably 10 years before we have an improvement in this situation. So there's a number of solutions. Immigration is part of it, and unfortunately, we didn't have as much immigration over the last 2 years because of the pandemic. This will resume. This will increase. So this is a good news, but that won't be enough. So it means that businesses will have to manage their human resources differently in the future. The time where it was easy to hire people, well, this time is gone. So it's time to look at long-term solution for business. Sometimes technology is a good solution. It's not always possible to use technology. Technology has been really improving, so it's possible more and more to replace some tasks inside the company to reduce your need for workers. Sometimes it's to do better in terms of hiring people. We realize in our research that especially for small business, it's still the owners who are looking for people towards the network. Well, in the situation where there's a war for talent, it's almost impossible to do that now. Also, like I said, there's an untapped group of workers. Younger people with less experience have difficulties to find a job. That's also the case for older people who would like to stay in the labor force. It's often more difficult for them. The unemployment rate for immigrants is higher than people who are born in Canada. So basically, we will have two things in conclusion. It's a long-term issue, so we need long-term solution when you think about this. And also we have to look differently at the job market that we used to as a business, because the job market has really changed. So that's really important for business to understand and to take action, because otherwise they will be limited in their growth.
Well, staying on this theme, I've got a question from our audience, and Pierre, I'm just going to circle back to you just for a second. What impact do high rents and house prices have on consumer spending and the rest of the economy? So Pierre, do you want to go at that first, and then I'll ask both George and Michael to jump in.
Well, it's definitely having an impact. We find in major economic area, the price of housing has been increasing very significantly, and also the price of rent has been increasing. So this is going to limit the ability of many people to spend. The good news is right now Canadian, in average anyway, are richer, and also they are cash rich. So for now, we believe consumers are going to be the main driver of the recovery.
George?
Yeah, and I do think that through the pandemic, we were able to save a lot of money, a lot of disposable income, and the hope is that disposable income, as we see the light at the end of the tunnel and through the recovery stages, that money will be spent and put back into the economy by consumers. But no doubt, increased housing rates, rental rates, it does pose a problem, on affordability issues for residents in the community. So all those factors, we have to monitor carefully. We have to provide, and I think, we're trying to tackle this from a regional perspective on the housing affordability, affordable housing into our development areas within the region. But no doubt that potentially rising interest rates, high rental rates, these will all be impactful things for consumers, and we'll have to plan for that.
Michael?
Yeah, not a lot to add. I just think two things that I think of. One is the housing affordability that was mentioned really creates two-speed kind of society. There's those that own real estate and those that don't. And making sure that those that don't have options is really important. And the total cost of housing goes beyond just the cost of housing and rent. It includes the transportation that you need to get to and from your job or your whatever you're doing. And so creating, again, back to 15-minute cities, complete communities, places that people can, get rapid access to opportunities. George mentioned getting people to work is really important. The other thing is we haven't talked about, but Pierre and George's comments both reminded me of it, was around education and training. I think education and training is a huge, important piece of the puzzle. I know that there's a variety of institutions, Brock University, the colleges in Niagara, have been evolving and upgrading, their programming to meet, some of the challenges of the economy. But that's only going to intensify. And I think partnerships between business and education and retraining, training, upskilling. Pierre mentioned very well. I mean, there's a couple of good groups there that could do more to fill the gaps in the labor market, both at the senior end and also the lower coming out of school end. So I think those folks are potentially, there's groups of those folks that are really hit hard by inflation and housing. So again, back to education, upskilling, training, and also making sure that as we're building out housing, we're giving people options that may not be, it's not all about luxury housing. It's about practical, some smaller units that are creative, and you don't need a car, or maybe you don't need as much access to a car and you can cycle more. I mean, I know in Canada, we talk about cycling's kind of a niche mode, but I mean, some of the mode share growth that we're seeing in some urban parts of Ontario in cycling is remarkable. And Niagara's got one of the best climates anywhere because of the moderating effect of the lake. So I think, and it's flat, other than the escarpment, of course, it's flat. So it's a great place for cycling and other.
It's a really good
different
point
kinds
you're
of transport.
Thank you. It's a really good point you're making. All of you are making, and I think we're on this whole work thing, this remote work, and how is going to shape our future in Niagara. So bringing in the municipalities, what do they need to do to sort of adapt to this permanency of remote work? George? you want to take that?
Sure. And I think that's, the question of the day, right? How is the pandemic, the remote work really changing the workforce? And I think many companies, both private sector and public sector company, municipalities, are looking at, how do we attract the best and the brightest, and how do we retain staff as well? So I think much of those decisions are being made in terms of continuing to provide those service levels, but being able to offer that hybrid approach in terms of flexibility for the workforce. So these are going to be very important questions for employers as employers are looking to attract talent, and the labor force, as we've discussed, is getting more restrictive, and there's the race for talent and attracting people to come work for you. It will be important to make those decisions strategically as organizations around how flexible and how you want to position your organization to be able to attract the demand for workers that want to have some of that flexibility in remote environment where possible. And not in all cases, it is. It will be possible for remote work. I'm thinking of some manufacturing jobs, some other positions where you need to be there to do your work. But in other cases where you can offer that virtual ability to continue to work, I think it's going to be important for organizations to make those decisions, to have some flexibility around that for the workforce.
But does this not mean, though, municipalities are going to have to take a different view when it comes to housing, for example, and what work at home may mean to people? There may be a different bylaw, there may be different forms. They're going to have to adapt to the new change. What about intensification? It may mean more people may have to work at home, so you're going to see bylaws change. Michael, what do you think? Municipalities going to have to relook at how they do planning for the future, especially when you're talking about 15-minute cities?
Yeah, no, great point. I think land use change. I mean, we're seeing for a long time, for a lot of good reasons, there was a lot of reticence on the part of policymakers. I could say this because I was one at one point, to allow land use change, because once you kick open the door, it's hard to close it. And particularly now, I mean, it's a conversion of previously uneconomic or less productive economic spaces to residential primarily. But watch out for industrial. I mean, the value of industrial is also growing rapidly, and I think there's some interesting creative solutions that are coming down the pipe. I mean, look at the other thing I wanted to mention too is digital and digitization and AI and the application of technology. So in the industrial sector, where companies are able to invest in highest and best solutions, I know it's harder for the public sector to sometimes adopt the highest and best solution because they're more cost conscious, and procurement can be a bit of a challenge. But I think that's going to be a coming opportunity. We're just at the beginning of the application of digital tools to better manage assets and think about different scenarios for the future. So I think planning. I mean, I've loved planning forever, but I think planning is actually about to get more exciting with some of the digital tools that are coming, and then the pressures that you mentioned originally about conversion around land use and the need to intensify rapidly. I mean, the other thing I'll just make one more point here is the scale of population growth that Southern Ontario is looking at requires, when you do the math, it's quite scary in terms of the number of square footage of floor area required, even with some very conservative assumptions about how big households will be in the future. So even if you think households are going to get smaller and they're going to live in more compact spaces, it's still a staggering amount of space that has to be built. Well, with climate change, with urbanization and sustainability and the need to build in 15-minute cities, there's a need for a lot more nodes than we're planning for. And some of the nodes we plan for have not been economic because the market has just not gone there. There are winners and losers in sort of the number of nodes that are planned. And so I think I'm all over the place here. I apologize, but I'd say digital is one.
Your enthusiasm.
Better conversations between the public and private sector about what the market actually wants in terms of accommodating housing is another, and municipality, and some of George's comments about about how they engage in those conversations, use these tools, and ultimately maybe be a bit more dynamic in terms of how they enable land use conversions. I realize that might be controversial, but I think that's all necessary.
George, I have a question from an email question. Did you want to add anything to this concept of how municipalities may have to adapt their planning principles when they're looking at this new style of work?
I think it's very important. I mean, it's just an ever, an evolving issue for municipalities when you're looking at how the world starts to change, how working conditions begin to change. Environments change constantly as the economies evolve in communities. So I think more and more municipalities have to start to look at, what does that mean? How does that impact bylaws and policies that are being formulated? How does it impact, land use planning and some of those things that I think it'd be important for the municipalities to continue to look at those changes and be able to adapt with those changes to put the right policies in place.
Pierre, any thoughts before I go to the question from you?
I think it's difficult at this point to know exactly how the pandemic have changed things. I think in the next few years we'll have a more clear picture. Something we believe is remote work is here to stay, but what is going to be the extent of it? So that's still a question mark.
Yeah. So this is a question that's been emailed. As Regional Council has not shown the political will to tackle affordable housing, what can staff and the community do? Michael, I'll go to you first.
Tough question. I think what we're seeing is there are so many challenges out there, and I'll make a relationship here first. So in public markets, historically we have publicly traded companies, and shareholders are supposed to have votes over how things go. I mean, what we're seeing now is that in many cases private equity is coming in and shaking things up a little bit, and companies that are going private are able to be more nimble. Well, in the public space of democracy, what does that look like? Well, that means civic action communities coming together and advocating for what's right. Now, that's a delicate balance, because sometimes you get squeaky wheels that get too much play at council, etc. But I think really active communities that working groups and are productively advocating for things that the community cares about, and having really good conversations with business and with not-for-profit and with those who are helping some more distressed parts of our society. I mean, and there's only so many minutes in the day for everyone, but I really think a productive, engaged community where people are really participating and making democracy work as best as it possibly can. And sometimes that requires a lot of homework on the part of some people. And I think making sure that those people are looked after, and and in some cases find ways to get paid and have a livelihood to do that. I think that can be really productive. So I guess what I'm asking for here is I'm saying really active civic society getting engaged and helping make their community a better place, and working with maybe some of the more formal traditional channels that it's part of our democracy, thank goodness.
George, do you think this goes back to these public-private partnership, or is this more of a Canadian problem, not just a municipal problem?
Yeah, I think it's certainly a Canadian problem. I don't think it's just a problem that's facing the Niagara region or certain municipalities. I think it's Canadian-wide in most cities. The issue of affordability, is becoming very real. The divide between higher income levels, lower income levels, and being able to ensure that communities really leave nobody behind and be able to tackle some of the affordable housing issues. So as Michael indicated, I think, the general public community, need to continue to advocate, voice their concerns, and because to regional council. I think a lot of that has been happening. I think it's become a front and center issue for regional council to tackle. Certainly, it was part of the discussion around the incentives review that regional council just recently had the opportunity to review, and affordability and affordable housing was part of that discussion. So I think there'll be more to come on the affordability issue for the region, but certainly a Canadian problem, and we need to. We need to continue to address this and come forward with some policies that hopefully will be sustainable long term in terms of addressing some of the affordable housing issues.
We've seen a shift of people moving from sort of the cities into more rural Ontario everywhere across the province. I don't think the Niagara region is outside of this, and so this is really going to be a key to our expansion, is attract more people. What are some of the things that make us attractive? What is it that a region like ours needs to do to attract more people to be here? And it's always a problem to get skilled workers anywhere, and I guess because of the shortage. But does Niagara have what we need, or does it have what it needs to attract people, or what can Niagara do to attract the kind of worker we're going to need for the future? And I'll go to Pierre. Maybe you can give your thoughts.
That's a good, very good question. People are looking for better quality of life, and I think Niagara can definitely offer that. I was there last summer, had a great holiday in the Niagara region with my family, and it's a beautiful region. So the number one attractive factor is that. After that, what you need is housing need to be affordable. People are leaving often Toronto because the housing market doesn't allow them to get the house they're looking for. So that's going to be an important factor. But I would say, from the quality of life factor, I think Niagara has a lot to offer.
Michael, thoughts?
Yeah, I think the growth of Ontario. Generally, the demographers get it. I mean, if you look decade to decade, they get the growth projections pretty well right, decade to decade. The question that they don't always get right is specifically where do people land exactly, sort of within the regions. And so I think Niagara can be pretty confident that it's going to get a lot of growth, just because Ontario and Canada is such an attractive place compared to so many other places in the world. There is a lot of people who want to come here, and they're going to want to continue to be here. We have, there's a lot of great reasons, and I won't go into them. I think, this group can articulate them as well as I can or better. I think the question is how well will Niagara accommodate that growth, and will it be done in a way that is, sensitive to all the things that we've talked about? Is it giving people, all the opportunity to access? Is it attracting a balance of, service workers and also higher paid workers doing, participating in really senior levels? Does the education system really squeeze allow people to do their best work and to achieve the most that they can possibly achieve? And there's been lots written. Pierre could probably speak better than I can about how much does Niagara rely on its neighbors in upstate New York, given the evolution of the U.S.-Canada border, and how much of Niagara's economic output is actually focused on more international markets that are way further away and are probably more knowledge-based. So that would be my thought.
George, just want to add that. Then we'll go to a question we have from our audience. So George, go ahead. What are your thoughts?
Sure. So I think, as an economic developer, our value proposition in Niagara is very strong, and both panelists have mentioned the quality of life. I think people really do want to look at a quality of life that's always in the decision-making process for people and where they want to live. But part of that quality of life also requires the ability to work and to find employment. And so I think it's important for us, from many aspects, to continue to advocate and promote the value proposition that Niagara offers to investment, to companies, to good paying jobs, manufacturers to come to the region, because people often will follow jobs, and the quality of life is a significant influencer in decision making, but also that ability to have a good job and to make a good living is something that's going to be very important for people and for companies investing in the region. We have so many assets. We have great incentive programs to encourage that investment. And so we want to continue to do that. And I think as we encourage more investment in jobs, we'll see more people wanting to come to the region for those jobs.
We've got about 3 minutes left, but there's been a lot of pressing questions on this same issue come through from our live audience. So I'm going to read what the question is. Many people in the chat are expressing the desire for a unified public transit in Niagara. What is delaying this process, and how can we speed it up? And George, I'll go to you and just for a very quick snapshot on your thoughts. How can we speed up having a unified public transit system in Niagara?
Right. An integrated public transit system is, as I mentioned earlier, I think critical, really important in terms of moving people around and providing the connectivity to the region. More to come. I know this has been debated. I know this has been something that's been ongoing in the region for some time, but I think very shortly, I believe at some point this year, there'll be a report coming forward and a debate soon coming forward at Regional Council regarding the integration of public transit. So I think much more to come very shortly.
Pierre, the importance of public transit to a region? We've kind of touched on this, but any final thoughts?
Definitely. I think infrastructure are key for economic development, and public transit is a key to economic development, especially in this time where sustainability and the environment has become very important issues. So this is another good reason to improve our public transportation system.
Michael?
Nothing to add other than I think absolutely important, totally critical for so many different reasons. But the other thing is it's a land use shaper. It can really be used properly deployed. Public transit can be an amazing land use shaper, and land use and thoughtful land use and master planning can really move the needle in terms of productivity, value creation, quality of people's lives, sustainability, all those things. Getting it right is really, really important.
Well, I think it's an important question to end this session. I want to thank all of you. I'm going to flip this back to Mishka, and it's been great in a virtual environment to have this discussion today. Thank you.
My thanks to this esteemed panel for the thought-provoking dialogue. There's much to take away from here and to shape our priorities when it comes to advocacy. And now, a brief word from one of our sponsors.
Good morning. I hope everyone is enjoying Niagara's Economic Summit. My name is Bruce Peaver, and I'm a partner in our St. Catharines office and a proud resident of Grimsby. KPMG has been serving the Niagara region and has been part of the business community since 1937. Our office is located in downtown St. Catharines. We believe Niagara clients are best served by an office in the community. We do our recruiting at Niagara College and Brock University, hiring students for co-ops and upon graduation. We are dedicated to a thriving local Niagara economy. Now, you may know KPMG, but you may not know KPMG Enterprise. We are a practice group dedicated to the advising emerging private and mid-market clients. We work with entrepreneurs, family businesses, private clients, and fast-growing companies as they build successful organizations. Our KPMG Enterprise Advisors understands what it takes for you to be successful at each stage of your business. Whether you're looking to grow, expand internationally, strengthen, or exit your business. Now, Canada has made real progress in the fight against COVID-19, but the impact of the pandemic is far from over. It has forever changed the way we interact with each other. And now we must all look forward and use this as an opportunity to really, truly reimagine the way we live and work to build a better world for all of us. This is an opportunity for individuals, businesses, and government to define their own new reality. Let us help you and provide guidance and insight on key issues related to changes in the market and with your own personal business strategies. KPMG Enterprise offers a wide range of services that can be customized to your needs. And we've got some of the best talent in the business and offer high quality professional industry experience, technical skills, and judgment. So thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of the summit. Stay well.
What if I'm not ready?
What if I don't have all the answers?
What if I just keep going?
What if it doesn't go as expected?
What if this setback helps me see the bigger picture?
What if I realize how far I've come?
What if I remember I'm doing the best I can with what I've got?
Today, I'm ready for what if.
Get ready for what if. Meridian, where banking feels good.
Our next panel discussion is focused on the long game, Niagara's opportunities, challenges, and defining our competitive advantage. To lead the discussion, we are joined by Robin Garrett, an independent consultant, chair of the Niagara District Airport, and former CEO of the Tourism Partnership of Niagara. Robin is also a former Niagara College professor, CEO of the Ontario Tourism Marketing Partnership Corporation, and Assistant Deputy Minister of Trade and Investment. Robin will join us after this brief word from one of our sponsors.
2020, a year unlike any other. A global pandemic, an economic recession, social unrest. It has tested our resolve, but it also has opened our eyes to how swiftly business can adapt, how dramatically the environment can heal, how resilient and connected we all are. Returning to the way of life that existed before COVID-19 would mark failure. This is our chance to repair and reshape the world in a way that works better for everyone. For 175 years, Deloitte has helped people, clients, and communities adapt to and embrace what's next. That journey continues with new challenges, but the same purpose: to make an impact that matters.
Hello, my name is John Bellhauer, and I'm a partner in the Ontario Region Tax Practice. I'd like to welcome you today to the Niagara Economic Summit and hope that you are enjoying the session so far. This session and panel discussion, The Long Game, is an important one to the future success of the Niagara region and to us at Deloitte. The events of the last 2 years have fundamentally changed the world, leaving no industry untouched, especially travel and tourism. Specifically, the long-term challenges and opportunities in the hospitality sector are an important focus for the Niagara region. At Deloitte, our integrated team of hospitality professionals deliver innovative solutions to complex issues, providing businesses with market insights and strategic guidance to the sector. I hope you enjoy the insightful panel discussion today and are energized to go back to your organizations with fresh ideas and unique perspectives. Thank you.
Hello and welcome. It's my pleasure to be talking about the next decade and what that looks for us, both the challenges and the opportunities. And it's my pleasure to introduce our panel. We have the Honorable Perrin Beatty. He is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the 200,000 member Canadian Chamber of Commerce. In 1972, he was elected to the House of Commons, and in 1979, he was appointed Minister of State Treasury Board in the government of Joe Clark. He has gone on to hold 6 additional portfolios in subsequent governments, and he is also an officer of the Order of Canada. Jay Wright is the president of Arterra Wines Canada. He oversees domestic and international sales, marketing, and operations for Canada's leading wine company. Jay joined the company in 2001 as president of Vincor International Inc. and became the CEO in 2006. He began his career in marketing at Procter & Gamble, spent 10 years at Nabisco, and then became Director of Innovation at Molson Breweries. And Matthias Oppenlander is chair of the Grape Growers of Ontario. He farms over 400 acres of vineyards and owns Country Time Vineyards and Hubel Grape Estates. Matthias was selected as Grape King by his fellow grape growers in 2006, and he played that role of industry ambassador at events across the country. So welcome to our 3 great panelists. I look forward to our discussion. And I'm going to kick it off with the first question about, of course, the pandemic. The pandemic has changed the dynamic between industry and government, and with governments in many cases helping businesses to survive. Do you think that this dynamic is a lasting effect? Or do you think that we're going to go back to business as usual in the coming months and years? And I'm going to put this question to Perrin Beatty.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me today. We are living through an unprecedented period where it was essential for the government to get engaged to help both families and businesses to be able to make it to the other side of the river during the pandemic. And that job isn't finished yet. We still have to ensure that businesses are able to transition from an economy that's been based on lockdowns and subsidies to where both businesses and families are able to be self-sustaining again. But it's critical that we do that. We're grateful that the government has extended supports into May of next year, particularly for the hardest hit sectors. But it's also going to be critical for us to reopen the economy and for us to have a private sector driven recovery. And we have to focus over the longer term on growth at a level that is much higher than it was prior to the pandemic, and growth that's much more sustained over the course of years, because we're dealing with a national debt that has grown dramatically. And the government also has ambitious plans for dealing with climate change and bringing in a whole range of new programs. The only way to be able to manage that is through private sector-led growth. So that's what the debate is here in Ottawa. How do we achieve that growth? It's important that we understand there's a difference between government spending and economic growth. We can't borrow our way back to prosperity. What we have to do is encourage investment in the private sector and generate the growth from that.
Absolutely. So, Jay or Matthias, do you have anything to add to that? You want to go on to the wine industry? Okay, so keeping that in mind, what does Niagara's wine industry look like in the era of free trade? How have agreements such as that Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, and the Comprehensive Progressive Agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, how do they affect the industry, and how will it look in the future? Jay, maybe you want to kick that off?
Sure, thanks Robin, and thanks for inviting us today, and what a gorgeous day it is. You know, as we come through this pandemic, as you suggested, you know, free trade is a very important. I mean, we're in an industry where we support free trade, there's no question. And we've built Inniskill and Ice Wine as one of the top products through the duty-free network around the world. And you know, when you turn, as Matthias will say, when you turn grapes into wine, that's one of the highest value-added agricultural food products that exist in the world. And you know, one of the things I will say is that you know, while we support free trade, some of the agreements recently, you know, haven't taken into account the fact that in countries like the United States with California, and in France and Italy and Spain, the incentives that are available, you know, for the agriculture of grapes to wine tends to be much more robust than it is here in Canada. You know, as a home team, we've lost a few in the last little bit, and we need to double down and reinforce the importance of these kinds of incentives for our industry, to be quite frank. You know, the share of VQA 100% grown grapes wine in Ontario at the LCBO, the share of 100% Ontario wine at the LCBO is 7% and has been 7% for the last 20 years. So, you know, our younger consumers believe in local, whether it be food or wine. They can't wait to get back into the tourism of Prince Edward County and Niagara, et cetera. And we're looking for more support for our industry as we think about incentives for agriculture across our country.
That's such a good point. You know, the trend around local, eat local, is growing enormously. Perrin, did you want to add to that question? Add to those comments that Jay made?
I certainly, I defer to the experts from the wine sector, which I'm certainly not. I'm a consumer, and I've consumed my share of Niagara wines because of the quality. And I often cite the wine industry as an example of a sector that responded very well to free trade at the time that we reached the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement. And it was the leaders in the wine industry, particularly in Niagara, but also in British Columbia, who came to the government and said, we can't compete on the basis of the way in which we've been operating in the past. We need to move upscale, we need to modernize in what we're doing, and we need some assistance from government to be able to do that. And what they demonstrated was that was really a paradigm for Canadian industry across the board, that the place for us to compete is not on the low end with cheap commoditized items, but on the high end based on quality. And Niagara producers have really demonstrated their capacity to do that. If there are further incentives that are needed to be able to do this as we continue to compete in global markets, we should do it. Certainly in terms of the promotion of Canadian wines and helping people be aware of the quality that's on offer here. There's a lot of scope for us to work together in terms of doing that. This is a truly remarkable product. It is, the industry is led by people who are visionary in Canada, and it's one that we should be sharing more in Canada itself and around the world as well.
We all need to be ambassadors for our wonderful wine industry, for sure.
I am prepared to do that.
Absolutely. Okay, let's turn a question over to Matthias. We've heard that it's been a difficult year for agriculture in Niagara. Should we expect more of this in the coming years, what with climate change? And what do you think this means for our industry?
Well, thanks for having me this morning and putting on this summit. Certainly, I've been here for 37 years. It's my 38th harvest that I'm bringing in this year. And I have never seen quite a challenging harvest like I've seen this year. Unfortunately, they seem to be becoming more the norm over the last couple of years. The fluctuation in our weather patterns are very erratic and wild and make it very difficult to predict what's happening. It's the extremes that we deal with. I mean, 2020, as I go back, we had the pandemic, which made it hard for us, but the climate, 2020 was probably an ideal season, and 2021 just was the opposite. The years of the opposites. We had a really mild winter, only to be followed by a freak snowstorms in the middle of April. I mean, I still remember tender fruit was in bloom, the peaches, the apricots, the apples, the pears, full bloom, only to wake up one morning to see just about a foot of snow. I've never seen anything like this. This was followed by really wild weather. We had wild storms. Hail seems to be becoming just the norm around here. Like you can almost count it at some site in Niagara. We're getting hailstorms. We're getting thunderstorms that deposit large amounts of rains, but we don't get the steady rains that we need to grow the crops successfully. Like it's the extremes. What do we face? A drought, heat waves, or wet season, or cold winter, polar vortex. These events are here to stay and they're becoming more the norm. So we need to prepare for this. And I'm happy to say as a grape and wine industry, we have been very proactive. It's almost 14 years ago, we formed Ontario Grape and Wine Research Incorporation. It's owned between the wineries and the grape growers, where we actually set priorities for research. We levy our growers and our wineries a tonnage fee, and then we actually set the priorities. And one of the priorities is actually to look at climate change and how do we adapt to it. We need to get ready for it. And I think as an industry, we need to have that conversation. What do we need to do? We know global warming is here. It's here to stay. Climate change is real. How do we, as an industry, as a grape and wine industry, become responsible to make sure we mitigate these effects in the practices we do, but also as an industry, how do we adapt to it and become successful, sustainable, financially, and even environmentally? We need to play our part to say we're a responsible industry to address this issue. It's only good for us. We need to have that discussion. Is there different practices? Do we need to grow different varieties? As an industry collectively, we need to get together, and we are getting together and decide what we need to do. How do we prepare for this? What is needed for us to become a sustainable and successful industry in the future as we face climate change and global warming?
And sustainable is absolutely something that everybody is interested in. Some of you may know that Niagara is actually seeking UNESCO certification for our area as a geopark. And I'm happy that Jay Wright, you're on the panel. You are one of our sponsors. Thank you for that. Just maybe talk a little bit about the importance of sustainability. And of course, sustainability includes the environmental aspect, but there's an economic and a social component to that, right? Maybe if I could invite Jay or others to comment on that.
Sure, thanks. You've really hit the nail on the head. I mean, this is a crisis, as we know. We've been following the news of the summit in Glasgow. Every day, as Matthias said, we deal with climatic shifts, and so investing as a country in dealing with climate change, especially in industries like ours, there is a benefit in our climate over the long term, I believe, to create even better quality wines. But the industry has to, as Matthias said, work very closely together, to make investments, to invest in technology and machinery, to do our best, to ensure that we are reducing our carbon footprint on the economy. The great thing about our local tourist industry, right? Especially with those in their 20s and 30s, they're discovering the importance of local. And climate change is a critical issue that we need to focus on.
That's great. Thank you, Jay. Any other comments from our panelists on that? All right.
Well, I think it only makes sense, like Jay said, the people are asking for it, the consumers are asking for it. We know it's real. We cannot no longer pretend that it isn't happening. We see it daily. And so we need to get ready for it because the consumers are asking for it. The consumers are asking for it for us to be environmentally responsible, socially responsible, and we need to embrace this. And quite frankly, it only makes business sense to do this.
Absolutely.
I would add just a couple of comments to that as it relates particularly to climate change. It's real, it's existential, we do have to deal with it. The real question is how we move ahead together. And the question mark in my mind in dealing with the current government is whether or not they see business as a partner or as a problem. We can only be successful in making the transition to net zero if we're all working, if there's really a Team Canada approach and both industry and government are working together. I am concerned that too often business is casted as the villain in the piece as opposed to being an integral part, an essential part of trying to make the adaptation. And for the vast majority of businesses that I know, their leaders take the position that they want to be good and responsible members of society. They understand that this is existential and that business has to provide leadership. So there's a willingness to work with government if it's reciprocated. And the policies have to be ones that make sense. You look at what happened on the other side of the border where President Biden killed off Keystone XL and then went, as he saw gasoline prices going through the roof and the potential for shortages, he called upon Russia and Saudi Arabia to increase production. What's the logic of this? There isn't any. And what we should be doing is having a strategy that is a strategy, particularly between Canada and the United States, that allows us to make the transition to a low carbon economy and to do so successfully without doing very serious damage to the economy. The other area where we need to do much more work than we've done is to recognize that climate change is both real and it's happening. And whatever we do, we'll continue to see climate change progress. So the question in Niagara, for example, is what are the impacts on the agricultural sector? And how do we adapt to it? And how do we work together, government and business, society alike, to be able to mitigate the damaging effects of climate change and to be able to adjust to the changes that are taking place?
Absolutely. And I think every business needs to be thinking about sustainability for sure. Let's turn our attention now to the hospitality sector. This pandemic has had an absolutely devastating impact on hospitality. Will this sector go back to where it was in 2019? I invite everyone to comment on this, and maybe we start with you, Perrin.
The short answer is I believe it will. It's hard for people to accept that at this point because this is the sector that was hardest hit of all. And usually in a recession, it is first in, first out. Those who are first affected are the ones who recover first. In this instance, tourism, hospitality, travel were the first to be affected, and they'll be the last to emerge from the recession. And that means that government is going to have to continue to provide supports to enable businesses which have been so hard hit to be able to survive and to recover. But when you take a look at the fundamentals, the fact is we are all, it's a wonderful thing that we can get together today by Zoom, but we are all craving the day when we're able to get together in person and when we're able to resume more ordinary lives. In every other recession that we've had in Canada, family savings have been depleted over the course of the recession. This is the first one ever where savings have actually gone up during the recession as a result of all those government transfers and as a result of the fact that people were staying home and not spending. And that means that we've got a massive buildup of savings in Canada of over $200 billion. a good chunk of that is going to be used by Canadians to try to resume their ordinary lives again, to get back into travel, to get back into visiting Canada, visiting family, seeing the country, and having more ordinary lives again. And I believe it bodes well for the long-term future of the sector. But the key is to assist people to make it to the other side of the river. We can't have businesses and people drowning 50 feet from shore. We have to provide the supports until they're able to become self-sustaining again.
Absolutely. Any other comments, Jay? You want to take a crack at this one? How do we get the hospitality back?
Obviously, as Perrin said, these are the hardest tourism, travel, hospitality, going out to eat. I mean, these are the hardest hit areas through the pandemic, and it's been tragic. There's been a lot of businesses that have gone out of business. And a lot of folks who, as you know, have had to depend on support from our governments, right? And the governments did step up quite impressively and have extended it right now in these industries. And so it's been a very tough time. We took the opportunity through this time to make investments and do upgrades in our estate wineries to prepare them for what we think will be a very bright future. We also took the opportunity to make investments in creating e-commerce and direct-to-consumer opportunities. So folks who are at home in Zoom, as an example, can shop our estates online at Niagara Great Estates, at Jackson Triggs and Inniskillen, as an example. And so we also created what I would call, as we're slowly getting back to, I don't know about normal, but as people are getting out now, and as the rules are loosening with respect to the pandemic, making sure we keep safety and health first, but then creating experiences at our estate wineries that are, I would say, more individual, smaller groups, being able to create better service for them has been something that we've realized creates loyalty and is better for our business. Now, what I will say is we're very excited about the future. As I said to you, especially consumers in their 20s and 30s really believe in local, they believe in food and wine and experiences. And Niagara, as we've seen from the GTA, is the very top #1 tourist area that they want to visit as they come back. And so we're readying ourselves for concerts, for weddings, for all the things that we see, that pent-up demand. And as Perrin mentioned, the fact that for the first time coming out of a recession, if you will, we're seeing folks with savings ready to spend. And so we're excited about the future, and we're looking forward to this pandemic being in the past.
And we need to keep those dollars here, right? Domestic tourism is going to be our recovery. So we really need to have great experiences right here at home. So glad to hear you're working on that. Matthias, did you want to add to that? I know you were telling me a story about
picnics. I can only echo
picnics.
the comments that Jay and Perrin made. I think obviously we want to go back to what we call normal, the old, but I think we can probably even do better than that, because the local, we have 8 million people, I think, within an hour, 2 hours of our area here. And they're discovering Niagara, and they're discovering Southwestern Ontario, and they're discovering Ontario. And we need to seize on that opportunity and make sure we bring them here and give them an experience of a lifetime. I know they're ready to embrace it. I saw it last year after we were locked down for a couple of months, and eventually it opened up. I mean, I live right behind some major wineries, some tourist attractions, and it was just like a beehive. And I was glad to see that, and I think we can seize that opportunity, but we got to do it in a safe way. I always make light of the situation. When I first came here 37 years ago, I didn't realize that Canadians or Ontarians even owned a bicycle. Coming from Europe, bicycle was a major transportation over there. And in 1984, I didn't see anyone ride a bicycle here. And now we're almost overrun with it when it comes to tourism in the wineries and in the hospitality sectors. I think there's a great opportunity to seize that, to make the investments that we need to do in infrastructure, and to do this safely. Invite the local people to come, and the people from Toronto and the surrounding areas, and certainly we're looking forward to the day when international tourists come back and discover Niagara. But I think we want to go back to normal, but I think we can even do better than that.
Absolutely.
I wonder whether I can just add a word to that as well. One of the things that our federal government could do right now is on this aspect of international tourism, particularly from the U.S. We need to clean up a couple of areas. The first is the PCR test, which the government insists upon for people coming into Canada. It is simply too much of a deterrent that if somebody's living in Western upstate New York, they're not going to come over to Niagara on the Lake for an afternoon with their family, with this and with the requirement that they have a quarantine plan in case anything goes wrong while they're in Canada. What we need to have is regulations that are consistent on both sides of the border, whether you're going north or going south, and where there aren't disincentives for people to come into Canada from the United States if they've been fully vaccinated. We all should be encouraging vaccination. This is a medical miracle. And if the government believes that vaccination really does make a difference, as I believe it does, then we should be focusing on the fact that people are doubly vaccinated as opposed to creating friction at the border that makes it more difficult for our neighbors from the United States to come in to visit.
Absolutely. We need to encourage our neighbors to take the double vax for sure. Just a question that's come in through from one of our listeners. The last panelist talked about issues like housing and transit. What impacts do you think social concerns have on industry? Anybody want to take that? What impacts do social concerns have on our industries here in Canada?
Well, I can perhaps take a stab at that. They have enormous impacts on industry and investment. Industry is going to be looking at what is the availability of workers, for example, of labor, skills. What is the cost of living for their employees? What's the quality of life that is available? And all of this affects investment decisions that are made by business. So infrastructure, social quality of life, and so on are all key factors in terms of economic development.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the labor shortages that are happening, particularly for hospitality workers, skilled trades people, truck drivers, nurses, just to name a few. What causes these shortages and what effects are they having? And when or if do you think that these issues will be resolved? I know I was recently at a restaurant and a robot took me to my table. First time that's happened to me. What do you think we're going to see in this shortage space? And maybe we'll start with Jay.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Robin. We've found that it's been very difficult to get sort of talent working with us in the wineries, at the estates, and so this is a real fundamental issue, right? I'm a believer that the government support programs, the CERB as an example, has been helpful, but to be quite frank, we'd like to get people coming back to work, especially putting health and safety first as we come out of the pandemic. That's going to be quite important. Federal government and provincial governments, I believe, have a role to play with respect to minimum wage. I know that that's been an issue in Ontario that's being addressed. I'd love to hear parents' view of that as we think about that. But we have to do our best to provide what I would call an engaged environment, to provide benefits and give folks the flexibility to balance their lives, to be able to work for us and have a life today as we come out of the pandemic that they believe has flexibility and balance to it. That's going to be very important as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Perrin. I think you were ready to say something there.
Well, let me take a stab at it. The first thing we have to recognize is that there was a very real and growing problem in terms of labor shortages in Canada and skills shortages prior to COVID. And that's become exacerbated during COVID, so that there was an underlying problem that we hadn't successfully dealt with. It was a mismatch between skills that were available and skills that were in demand in the marketplace. It was the fact that there are changing patterns in terms of Canadians' willingness to work. There are many jobs now that young Canadians, whatever amount of money they're being offered, don't want to take. It's hard to attract people into a packing house, for example. Much of stoop labor that people would be engaged in agriculture, often young people won't take that. We need to have an honest discussion in Canada about the changing nature of work and what sort of industries we want to have in Canada and where we source the people who are going to be necessary to do that, first of all. Immigration is going to play a key role in terms of meeting our needs, because we have to recognize the fact that all real growth that's taking place in our workforce is the result of immigration. In terms of the birth rate in Canada, we are not keeping up with the rate at which people are dying and the rate at which people are aging and retiring. And as a consequence, immigration is going to be absolutely critical. We need to have a better dialogue between business, government, and the educational sector so that we do a better job in terms of projecting what the skills needs are going to be in the future. So we're actually training people for the jobs for which there's going to be a demand in the future. Business itself has to invest more in upgrading the skills of their workers, and also in terms of automation. In many instances, it's possible for us to address some of these skill shortages through automation, but it requires a capital investment for us to be able to do that. There is no silver bullet. There's no one solution to this. What we need is a toolkit with a variety of tools that we can use to address various aspects of this problem. But it is urgent, it's growing, and we need a very real, frank discussion in Canada about what we do about it.
Absolutely. Matthias, did you have anything to add?
Very quickly, obviously, I mean, in the agriculture sector, a lot of people don't look at this as a viable career, but I think these things are changing. Obviously, in the seasonality, we do rely on seasonal jobs, but in our own business, we have full-time people employed all year round. And as we embrace and deal with some of the challenges as new technology is coming into our operations, we need the skilled labor force, and it's up to us to have the discussion and actually have that message that, no, there is a viable career in agriculture, horticulture, or viticulture, or in the wine business, and we have to have that conversation. It's crucial for me, as my operation is growing, that I have people that can run the technology, the new technology that is coming, and are educated to deal with the problems. So somehow we need to have that conversation. How do we make it attractive for people to enter into the agriculture and know that they can have a career here? But we also need to make sure that we are enabling them to make a living, to be part of the community, to raise a family, because that's what they're longing for, and have a sense of belonging. Like I always say, my people, my employees are my biggest asset. And I can buy $500,000, $1 million machine. If I don't have somebody to run it responsible, it doesn't help me. So we really have to realize that people are our biggest assets, and we need to continue to build them, educate them, and value them, and make sure that they can stay in our communities and know that they have a career here, horticulture and agriculture, or at the wineries, or the hospitality industry. It's important. It's important.
Well said.
That's what they're looking for.
Yeah, well said. We actually have a question from our live audience that builds on this. So what are we doing to support women's economic recovery from this uneven pandemic, impact of the pandemic? Anybody want to take a stab at that?
Perhaps I can start on that. One of the starting points has to be the availability of childcare in the short term. Mm-hmm. For women to be able to come back to work, they have to be able to, because they still carry most of the burden of child rearing, they have to be able to have an arrangement that enables them to leave the house. Without that, there's a very serious problem. Secondly, women have been very, very successful entrepreneurs. They've started so many of the new businesses. There has to be continuing support for small businesses in Canada to help them to be able to make it successfully the other side of the river. In the hospitality sector, women are very highly represented in that sector. We have to continue supports for the hospitality sector to enable them to be able to survive and to be able to resume normal operations. Those are, in the short term, some of the things that we can do that will help to open things up again so that women can participate more fully again. It has been very disturbing to see the figures that show that the participation of women in the workforce has fallen so dramatically during the pandemic. And our goal needs to be, with 50% of our population, that we not waste those skills.
Absolutely. Good. So the pandemic has highlighted weaknesses in our supply chain, which are still being affected today. So can you speak to the details of these and why you think supply chain issues are continuing issues we'll face in the future? Perrin, I think you wanted to take a stab at that.
Well, let me take a shot at it at any rate. There are many reasons why we're facing these problems. One is obviously the shortage of containers and the maldistribution of containers at the present time, which has caused prices to go up dramatically. Another has been, in some cases, shutdowns of industries in certain parts of the world, which has caused a shortage of raw materials, a shortage of inputs that are necessary to produce manufactured goods. Another is the skills shortages that we were talking about earlier, truck drivers being a case in point, but there are skills shortages in other areas as well in our economy that we've got to address to deal with this. Infrastructure, we have an infrastructure deficit in Canada. And we have to invest in critical infrastructure that allows us to move goods in Canada. So there's some immediate measures that we can take to address this, but we have to understand the fact that this is not simply a Canadian problem. It's one that's global in its nature, and we need to collaborate with our trading partners to enable supply chains to function effectively again. The other thing that I would add to that is that as we look at the lessons learned from the pandemic, we need to have an arm's length group outside of government to do a review once we get through the pandemic about what are the lessons learned. And the goal shouldn't be to assign blame, but rather to simply ask ourselves honestly, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? What do we need to change for the future? One of the things that we need to look at is to understand that there will be more pandemics. There will be other crises in the future. And we need to address this question of whether or not the way in which we're organized today to procure essential goods and services makes sense under modern conditions. We can't bring everything to Canada. We can't make everything in Canada. We would price our products out of competition if we did that. But we should ask ourselves in the same way as we do in defense, where we build a defense industrial base that is premised on the question, if we were in a conflict, what is it that we would have to be able to produce here in Canada or in partnership with the United States to be able to supply our security needs? We should ask the same thing as it relates to health and some of the other areas where the security of our economy of our people is at stake. And we can address this in a number of ways by nearshoring, by bringing production closer to Canada. We can do it by diversifying suppliers so that we don't have all of the eggs in one basket in one part of the world. We can do it by building inventories. Some of these solutions are very costly, though, and we need to have a full discussion, business and government, about how we can fix this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's build on that. So in uncertain times, businesses need predictability more than ever, right? So how can government create a more predictable environment for business? Perrin, anybody want to talk about predictability and the need for predictability, Jay?
So Robin, a couple things before we move on from supply chain. Look, I want to say a couple things. First of all, we've been COVID's been with us now for 19, 20 months. And while supply chain issues of become very topical in the last, I'd say, few months, especially in the first many months of COVID. It was because we have a Ontario wine industry where consumption of wine was very much appreciated. We were able to, and I'm so proud of the team at Arterra, because we were able to work 24/7 to ensure that we got the wines to the stores at the LCBO, to our wine rack stores, through the estates, online, through direct to consumer, when a lot of the international wines weren't available. And they weren't available because of some of these supply chain glitches that you've heard about, that Perrin spoke eloquently about. And it just goes back to the importance of investing and supporting our local industries so that we're there in the tough times when, to be quite frank, when you're dealing with global supply chain challenges, maybe some of those other products aren't available, right? And so I just really wanted to make that point as we were talking about it. Supply chain challenges we face daily, but we have a very strong team working to ensure that we secure stuff and get it here early enough to get it through the channels that are important. And it takes really, I think, government and industry working together to support our local economy to do that. It couldn't be more important than talking about it with respect to this audience in Niagara. Sorry, I had to talk about that. What was your question?
That's a great point, absolutely. Buy local for sure. Well, we're going to turn to the topic of predictability and what government can do to help industry, deal with all the volatility. So is there something government could do on that?
Well, so I'll finish up on that one and just say that, look, over the last few years, we've had a couple of WTO challenges. We've had the federal government put in an escalator on the excise tax. We don't actually have confidence right now that the excise tax is being dealt with by the federal government. So to be very sort of direct with you, our federal government has not been predictable with respect to its taxes, with respect to the incentives we get. What we would like is long-term clarity and more incentives against what we think is the most important agricultural value-add product in Canada. So that, I would say predictability is important, and we haven't had it really in a consistent way over the last many years.
Right.
And I can just add to that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Jay is absolutely right. We need predictability when it comes to how our industry, a grain wine industry, is treated in both government levels. We need to make sure that we have consistency. We have programs that are renewed yearly, and they're only partial programs. We are not treated like the home team. We need to be treated like the home team. Home team have the home team advantage. Every other country has it, and that's predictability. Because when we plant a grape, it takes 4 years to get the first grapes off this vineyard.
Right.
And then the wineries turn it into wine. It's like 5 to 7 years before it goes on the shelf. So we need like predictability, and we need to know that the government is there to support local and domestic first.
Perrin?
Jay cited the escalator tax. Unfortunately, it's an area where there is predictability. It's predictable that it'll keep going up and up and up and up. And it's something where the federal government made the wrong decision there. As an ex-politician, it takes away accountability from the House of Commons for voting for tax increases because there's an automatic escalator built in. And it's something which is very damaging to business as well. On the issue of predictability itself, I've had this discussion with the Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister and said to her, perhaps the single most important thing that the government can do right now isn't writing another check, it's the message that it sends. There's a debate in Ottawa right now. Everybody accepted, and this includes all of us who are on this call, that the government had to intervene in society, it had to intervene in the economy to help people survive during the pandemic. But the debate now is that some people feel that now that the government has moved into the bedroom upstairs, they should take over the whole house. I believe it's critical that we restore the role of the private sector, that we refocus on growth. We are coming out of this alive, and that's good news, but with a $1.4 trillion headache. By the time of the next election, the national debt, according to the federal government's projections, is $1.4 trillion. You can't cut your way out of that. You'd plunge the country into a depression. You can't inflate your way out of that. It would destroy people's savings if you did that, and it would make us uncompetitive. It's irresponsible to just send the bill to our kids. The only responsible way of dealing with this is through growth at a sustained level and at a level that was much higher than the sort of 2% that we were experiencing prior to COVID. You can only get this growth from the private sector. It can't come from government borrowings. It has to be investment by the private sector. There will be a speech from the throne for the new parliament where the government sets out its agenda a month from now. What I've said to the Deputy Prime Minister is that more important than any program that's announced in the speech from the throne is the message that business is wanted and appreciated in Canada, and that the government understands that recovery will have to be private sector led. And that our goal is to say to the business community that we see you as a partner, as an essential part of Canada's success for the future. As every business person on this call understands, capital moves across borders like light through glass. It goes where it's wanted. And if the message being sent by the politicians is we're going to increase taxes on business, we're going to punish businesses that were successful during the pandemic, we're going to increase taxes on individuals, then the message is you're not wanted here, and businesses and people will go where they are wanted. So messaging is absolutely critical here, and then the government has to follow through. It has to do a review of the regulatory burden on business. One of the first areas to start, and it certainly affects the wine sector, is breaking down internal barriers to trade in Canada. Now's the time for us to provide some leadership on that. Now's the time for us to relieve some of the regulatory burden on business, and to make it clear that we're setting our sights on growth that is far greater than we knew prior to the recession, and that it has to be business-led growth.
And with growth, of course, we need population growth, and that turns us to another question, and that is we see pressures over land use in Niagara. As the population grows, how do you think we should strike a balance between the needs of industry, agriculture, and housing? Maybe Jay or Matthias. Matthias, why don't you tell us your thoughts on that?
So certainly we see that every day, as especially the pandemic has shown. We have seen a lot of people come and they want to live in the country now again, and they buy farms just for building lots, and that's putting a tremendous pressure on us, as they don't understand what it means to actually move into a farming community. They don't realize that there's noise, there's activity going on. They're here on the weekends and they see everything is beautiful, and they figure it would be a nice place to live. We have the fortune and the foresight that we actually greenbelted this valuable land here, but obviously that brings other challenges. Obviously, we're somewhat protected from industry moving in, but a successful greenbelt also we need a successful agriculture, horticulture, and tourism industry to sustain the land and what we do. We're land-based here, and in order to be successful here, we need to make sure that the farmers can make a living and they want to stay on the land. The pressure that other people are coming in and they want to retire here is putting a tremendous pressure on us when it comes to normal farming practices. Now, having said that, we need to deal with this. We want people to come here and live in the country. I think we need to find out how we can find that balance, how we live together, right? And as we build, I know there's a big movement as tourism is building up. Like people are asking, where is this? How far is this going to go? I know that there's movements afoot that that the wineries are getting criticized for getting the tourists in there and having events. Like, we need to make sure that we balance this together and live in harmony and make sure that we can all be sustainable, socially responsible, and make a living for each other.
Well said. Jay, did you want to comment on that too from the winery perspective?
Yeah, no, well said, Matthias. First of all, we're fortunate that we've secured the Niagara region with the Greenbelt. I think that was, great legacy work. This is a really complex issue that has to be planned very effectively. We have a very local and specific issue, that we're addressing today. We have Canada's oldest and largest winery right in the town of Niagara Falls, built in 1909. We have a zoned piece of land, vacant land just next to us that's zoned industrial. We're surrounded by homes today and by retail, and we have a need to ensure that that land has remained industrial next to us so that, the city can also have economic growth through industrial as well as, sort of the development of homes and housing. And, clearly there needs to be the issue of housing and density and affordable housing needs to be addressed. But we have a very specific issue, and these do come down to specific issues within the regions, within the city of Niagara Falls, that we're trying to address right now with the area.
Yeah, we need that fine balance for sure. The Greenbelt is precious, and of course we know it's up for review every 10 years, so we need to be vigilant about that. Great question from the audience. How can we reconcile the return of international tourism with environmental sustainability? How can we make tourism more sustainable? Maybe Jay, you want to think about that one?
Sure. How can we make tourism more sustainable? Well, I mean, I guess let's let Matthias talk about bicycles again. That might be a good thing to lean in with.
That's a great way to make business sustainable. More hiking, more cycling. Matthias?
Well, certainly, that's a great question. Obviously, the people come here to to regenerate themselves, and we got to do it obviously in a responsible way, sustainable way. I guess it's a great question. We have to face how do we make that socially and environmentally responsible.
I guess, as Matthias, as you know, when we're doing our hospitality at the estates, and we talk about the importance of grape growing. And we talk about, and through our food and wine program, and even our, through our food and wine program, we talk about, we serve local ingredients through the season to ensure that folks understand, the importance of local, and we try to talk about the sustainability of our buildings, the LEED awards we won at some of our, we reduce, we reuse, we recycle, we focus on the environment. I mean, it's part of the message that clearly when you're in our business and you're growing grapes, you're focused on all the time. I think it's a great question, and it's something that, as you said, when you're cycling and hiking and finding ways to get down to Niagara on buses and trains and things like that, that all helps.
And on airplanes too. You may know that we are looking at the Niagara District Airport, looking at electric planes. These are something that's very real. And wouldn't we be the right place to have a little route between Billy Bishop and Niagara? We have that now, but if it was an electric plane, that would be very sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
So
I might just add as
yes?
well that if we look at all of the industries in Canada, tourism is among the most sustainable, and it can be more so. We need to look at every element of it, whether it's land use planning or whether it's transportation and so on, to look at ways of making it more efficient and having less impact on the environment. But tourism is renewable. It is something which injects a great deal of money into the economy, and it helps small businesses survive. It helps local communities survive. And it certainly helps the Canadian economy more broadly. It's simply a matter of how we do our planning to look at all of the elements of tourism, to say, are we doing this in a way that is sustainable, in a way that does not have long-term damage on the environment. And I believe that the tourism sector is one that we should be looking at growing in Canada and attracting a larger share of international tourism.
Hey, Robin, one of the things that we're doing as a company, Matthias is aware of this as well. We have 165 wine rack stores in Ontario that serve, obviously, Niagara wines and our consumers. And we created a relationship with Metrolinx, and we now are bringing tourists through Wine Rock, bringing tourists down to Niagara through Metrolinx, so that, as I said earlier, electric is really great, but if you can't go electric, getting on a Metrolinx is an important way to get to Niagara and be a tourist and check it out if you don't have a car, or not having as many cars on the road.
Now, the international traveler loves trains. That's a great solution. Just one last question. The Canadian Chamber has put forward many policy suggestions during the pandemic. It was focused mainly on survival at the beginning. Now it's turned to recovery. What policies do you think need to be in place over the next decade for us to prosper? Perrin?
We've touched on a number of those, but the starting point is this, that we have to recognize that we can't borrow our way to prosperity, that what we need is a private sector-led recovery. We need to encourage investment. We need to encourage growth in the private sector. And we need to ensure that we make the transition as rapidly as possible, safely and successfully as possible, from an economy based on lockdowns and subsidies to one where we're open again, where we get our ordinary lives back again, and where we're able to be self-sustaining again. It's important for the government to understand one thing, and that is that as we come out of this global recession, every other country in the world has a laser-like focus on how do they increase their competitiveness, how do they increase their market share of the global economy. And if Canada allows its attention to drift to other areas, if we lose focus on the need to have a private sector-led recovery, we will find ourselves falling further behind. We can't go back to where we were prior to the pandemic, because where we were finding ourselves with poor competitiveness, and we were falling further behind other countries. We have to develop a strategy that didn't exist prior to the prior to the pandemic, to have economic growth that is greater than we had prior to the pandemic, and that is sustainable over the course of a decade or more, whether governments remain or whether they come and go. And so it starts with a commitment that the private sector must be the engine of growth and must be a full partner in the recovery and in sustained growth for the future. And then there's so many things that flow out of that, addressing the skills issues, investments in infrastructure in Canada that bring genuine returns on the money that is put in there. Looking at what we can do to encourage research and development and the commercialization of R&D in Canada, support for our export sectors in Canada, taking down regulatory barriers in Canada that make it difficult for Canadian businesses to compete. All of these things can be done, but we have to start with the recognition that the focus needs to be on growth, and it has to be private sector-led growth.
Excellent. Well, on that note, I'd like to thank all three of our great panelists. Thank you for the discussion. I took away some interesting ideas, and certainly I think sustainability came out as an important theme. And of course, to eat and drink local and visit Canada. So thank you, Perrin, Jay, and Matthias. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
A strong, growing, sustainable economy is our goal, and we truly appreciate the perspective shared by this panel. My personal thanks to each of you for your time and insight. And now it is my honor to be joined by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Honourable Steve Clark. Mr. Clark represents the riding of Leeds-Grenville and has served as an MPP since 2010. As a member of the provincial government, he held numerous positions, including Opposition House Leader from 2014 to 15 and Co-Deputy Leader from 2015 to 18. And as a fun fact, Mr. Clark gained attention across Canada in 1982 when, at the age of 22 and just out of university, he was elected Mayor of the city of Brockville. This gained him the title of the youngest Mayor of Canada. Minister Clark will join us after these messages from some of our sponsors.
When I started Ignora, we had zero debt, but we wanted availability of money. That's why we went to our bank. Even though I dealt with them for 35 years, they said, this is a new business, we can't finance you, we can't do anything. When TD came to see us, they didn't just sit in our offices. They walked the plant floor, they talked to our guys, they looked at what we were manufacturing. They saw that what we were building was a world-class facility, and TD wanted to be a part of it. When TD took over our commercial banking for us, I couldn't believe the level of detail and customer service that we received from them. I can't think of another commercial institution that could help you the way that TD has helped me. I'm Richard Wilson, the owner of Ignora. We fabricate the largest glass in North America.
Good morning. Thanks to Mishka and everyone at the GNCC for the continued opportunity to dialogue with members of our community. TD is proud of our association with the Chamber, given the central role it plays in coordinating economic activity throughout the peninsula. My name is Scott Galbraith, and I'm happy to serve as Vice President and leader of TD's business banking group in the region. We are based out of our commercial location in downtown St. Catharines and are happy to have a team of 7 business bankers there specifically dedicated to Niagara. It is this localized approach that we believe makes the difference in serving communities as entrepreneurs manage the ups and downs of their industries. It's been a different and challenging few years for many in the business world, and we are proud of how we have navigated the pandemic in many respects. We at TD look forward to today's summit agenda and are proud to be a part of the group that will assist in shaping Niagara for years to come. Thank you kindly and enjoy the day.
All great achievements start as brilliant ideas, but while anyone can have a great idea, the trick is to discover how to plug it into the world and reveal its potential. Where do you begin? How do you move from idea to concept to greatness? The Innovate Niagara team and its online portal can help. We offer the most comprehensive one-window approach to commercializing your idea into something more. Whether you are a graduating student, a fledgling startup, or an established business, Innovate Niagara has the resources you need to get your new idea or business off the ground. We offer training, mentoring, and networking. We pair enterprises with academic and research support and provide guidance for accessing resources. Essentially, our lines reach out to all of what Ontario and Canada have to offer, and we've put it all in one place. We've done the legwork. All you need to do is plug in. Now, we know how difficult money is to come by in the early stages of your business, which is why our services are offered for little or no cost. Navigate our intuitive website to get help at every step. Connect using your mobile device, or come visit us in person for one-on-one consultation. And don't worry about being left on your own. Regardless of how you find us, Innovate Niagara is about building relationships and being accountable to you. We provide you with the structure for success and follow up to ensure you stay connected. These are your ideas, and we think they're amazing. Come connect with Innovate Niagara. Plug your ideas into the world.
Hello everyone, I'm Steve Clark, Ontario's Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Thank you for inviting me to the Niagara Chamber of Commerce's Economic Summit. I'm happy to have the opportunity to discuss some of the important work our government is doing with our partners to support local economies, especially as Ontario continues to respond to COVID-19. We believe everyone deserves a place to call home, which is why we are making it easier to build a mix of housing options, to ensure that hardworking families can find a home that meets their needs and their budgets. When we introduced our Housing Supply Action Plan, our goal was to support the development of the right type of homes in the right places. We've cut red tape to get shovels in the ground faster, and we've implemented measures to unlock affordable housing options and remove unnecessary barriers to building housing. These policies come from extensive consultation with municipalities, stakeholders, and the public. Here's an example. We made changes so that the upfront costs of building new housing and the revenues from development received by municipalities are more predictable and accountable while taking the politics out of planning. We also allowed development charges to be deferred or paid over several years to enable more rental and more affordable housing projects. Our policies are working, and the evidence is clear. Here in the Niagara region, we have seen some great progress since we were elected in 2018. Housing starts in 2020 were the second highest level in the past decade, behind only 2019, which was the single highest annual level on record. And this year to date, rental starts in the Niagara region are currently 120% higher than they were in 2020. We've also provided our municipal partners with the tools and the flexibility to increase housing supply at the local level. And that's why we have directed our municipalities to prepare for growth by conforming their official plans to provincial policies by July 1st, 2022. The faster official plans are completed, the faster we can start building much needed housing and create jobs and protect Ontario's bright future. And under the Supporting People and Business Act this fall, we propose to streamline the approvals process and cut red tape by giving municipalities greater authority to delegate certain minor planning decisions to a committee or to municipal staff. Together, we are making great progress in building homes, creating jobs, and making life more affordable for Ontarians. But we know that building the right mix of homes in the right places requires decisive action at all levels of government. That's why we continue to call on our municipal partners to put these tools to use so that communities in every corner of the province can unlock the full range of housing options that meet residents' unique needs and budgets. This summit is a great opportunity for policy decision makers, nonprofit leaders, and the private sector to share ideas on how we can continue to support our businesses and keep our communities in Niagara and across Ontario strong and prosperous. I hope you have a productive and informative conference. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Mr. Clark, thank you for your remarks. And now a topic that you have identified as being critical to our path, our ethical future. How will this pandemic change how we live and how we work and how our municipalities will function? How will it reshape our collective values and priorities across Niagara? Our moderator is Emily Kovacs, the Executive Director and CEO of the Niagara Folk Arts Multicultural Centre, which supports newcomers in their integration into Canada. She works extensively in government policy, innovation, and change management, creating inclusive, diverse, and productive workspaces, policy, and administration. Ms. Kovacs will join us after these messages from some of our sponsors.
Hi, I'm Andrew Godis, Dean of the Goodman School of Business here at Brock University. It's our pleasure to once again be sponsoring the Niagara Economic Summit. Each year, this important event brings our region together to discuss the pressing issues of the day. This year is no different and perhaps one of the most challenging to date as we build towards recovery from the most disruptive period in our generation. The Goodman School of Business remains committed to working with you as we position Niagara to move forward, assessing the opportunities and challenges and determining our path to prosperity. Our Goodman Group has been working with local professionals, entrepreneurs, and businesses providing a full range of learning and development services. Business Breathers was born from the pandemic and provides bi-weekly respite from our daily tasks to pause and gain insight from area experts on maneuvering through the promise and pitfalls of trending topics. Over the past year, through Business Breathers, professional development programs, and venture development support, Goodman Group has disseminated more than 1,600 hours of content to learners. If you're interested in professional development for yourself or developing a custom program to fit your business, I welcome you to contact our Goodman Group, our community-focused service provider within the Goodman School of Business. Our commitment to Niagara was the impetus for the Goodman School to undergo a rigorous Business School Impact System Assessment process, better known as BSIS. The process is designed to determine the extent and nature of business school's impact upon its local environment. The process is well established in the French higher education sector and offers an impartial, third-party analysis of the impact the business school is making locally. It was a lengthy and in-depth look at every aspect of the school, the results of which are too lengthy to go into here. But the results let us say with confidence that Goodman is a willing and effective partner in the Niagara region, contributing over $380 million annually in economic contributions and over 8,500 service hours by our faculty to the community each year through pro bono consulting and serving on boards and committees. Goodman carries the BSIS label with pride as only the third Canadian business school to have undertaken this analysis. As you participate in this year's GNCC Niagara Economic Summit, please know that you have a partner within the Goodman School of Business at Brock University. Our commitment to Niagara is a part of our mission as a globally oriented and community-dedicated business school. We're here for you.
Welcome to the third and final panel of the GNCC's Niagara Economic Summit 2021. At this panel, we're going to be talking about our ethical future, and with me are 5 distinguished guests, and I'm honored to introduce each of you today. First, I'd like to introduce Rafiq Danji, who is the Executive Director of Sustainability Leadership, working with businesses across industries to provide strategic insight, planning, and support to becoming truly sustainable businesses. He has worked with various levels of management, departments, organizations, and government, and works to turn complex ideas into simple steps. Welcome, Rafiq. Second, we have Mr. Sean Vanderklis, who is the new voice of the Superior Morning with CBC Radio 1 show. And I think he's a very familiar face to Niagara. At least I'm honored to call him someone who's a friend and a colleague. He began his journalism career in 2016, co-founding the podcast One Dish, One Mic, and was awarded the 2020 CJF CBC Indigenous Journalism Fellowship by the Canadian Journalism Foundation. Welcome, Sean. Next, we have Dr. Mike Moffat, who is an assistant professor in the Business, Economics, and Public Policy group at Ivey and is the Senior Director of Policy and Innovation at the Smart Prosperity Institute. In 2017, Mike was the Chief Innovation Fellow for the Government of Canada, advising Deputy Ministers on innovation policy and emerging trends, and represented Canada at the G7, OECD, and Organization of American States meetings. He served as an economic advisor to Liberal leader Justin Trudeau and played an advisory role on policies including the Canada Child Benefit. Welcome, Mike. Next, we have Dr. Kim Delat, who's a MIDEX postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Sociology at Brock University and at the Vanier Institute of the Family. Her research operates at the intersection of the sociologies of work and culture. She's currently working on projects on the social organization of tech workspaces and flexible work, and how creative workers engage with diversity and inclusion. Welcome, Kim. And last but certainly not least, Mia Huntington, who is the Executive Vice President, Digital and Associations at Elevon Incorporated, an internationally recognized most ethical company. She has more than 20 years of financial services experience and a background in technology solutions. She's also a member of the U.S. Bank America's Holdings Board and is also on the Women in Payments Advisory Board. Welcome, Mia. Welcome, distinguished guests. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. I'll start with a first one that is open to all, and feel free to jump in. So the first question is consumer behavior permanently changing, and how? And is consumption still driven by price, or are other factors such as sustainability and ethical production becoming important? Is anyone interested in jumping in first? All right, I see Sean. Thanks for rescuing me, Sean. Go ahead.
No problem at all. I think if you look at what is happening from a business perspective in the Niagara region, specifically with the use of living wages and with the use of that easily being identifiable to the broader community, but more specific to the patrons of that community, you'll see that people are willing to pay more money, providing that businesses provide that living wage. If you go to, example, Beechwood Donuts in Niagara specifically, which is located in St. Catharines and is on, my apologies, my boss is calling me, and is on St. Paul Street, you'll see that people are willing to spend extra money simply because of that. I think the times of us going to coffee shops and businesses that do exist simply because that's what we've always done is a foregone era or a bygone era, if you will. And people are being more conscientious with how they purchase their products and where they get. There's a big drive locally, provincially and nationally to shop local, to support minor, smaller businesses as opposed to big box stores. I think part of the definition or the distinctions that communities bring is that local retail market or that local market that has a promotion or has a capability of promoting locally sourced and ethically sourced products.
Wonderful, thanks very much. Certainly ethics and shopping local have certainly been primary indicators of the COVID recovery for now. Rafiq, I saw your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, just building off of what Sean was saying, is that consumers, without realizing, we vote with our dollar. We where we spend our money is where we're saying, that's the company that we support. That's the company that we want more of that product from, or what we support what they're doing. And that includes how the products are made, where they're coming from, how they treat their employees, the impacts that they have on the environment. And we're so fortunate to have so many different options with globalization bringing us so many different options. We start to question not just what we're purchasing, but what the company represents, what they're doing, what they support. And the question that comes up more and more is, it's kind of a simple concept actually, which is purpose. What does this company, what is their purpose? What is it? Is it a purpose that I support or that I believe in? And so, yes, customers are certainly changing their behaviors, and they're demanding that businesses take responsibility for their actions and do better by doing good.
That's certainly lessons for all businesses and industries to take in, right? What I heard was voting with your dollars, and the fact that purpose is a lot more important than before. So certainly sage advice for us. Kim, Mia, or Mike, anyone else would like to jump in before we go to the next question?
Sure, I'll chime in.
Go ahead.
My co-panelists raised really important issues about the agency and the autonomy that people have over choosing to support businesses that speak to their set of morals. But at the risk of being a Debbie Downer, I'll also point out that social media and micro targeting means that we as consumers are exposed to way more stuff than potentially any other generation has been. And it, not only that, but it's stuff that we might actually want. You know, that micro targeting can be very effective. So just at a point when we're trying to reduce consumption, we're actually exposed to ever more levels of stuff and things that we might want. And as a representative here as well, on behalf of the Vanier Institute of the Family, I'll point out that this is also the case for parents. You know, there's an entire parenting industrial complex. Just the other day, I was exposed to an ad online for a parenting class, and it showed a cartoon image of a boy throwing a temper tantrum next to an image of him as an adult with handcuffs being taken away by police, with the implication being if you don't nip this bad behavior in the bud, you're going to raise a criminal. So the level of scare tactics as well that are being introduced into marketing is something that should raise eyebrows.
Okay, so certainly, ethics in marketing and ethics in responsible behavior as it relates to our whole society is also extremely important. Thank you for that. So I'll go to the next question. And this one particularly, I'd like to point to Rafiq, if I may, please. The question is, the common perception is that there has to be a trade-off between economic growth and environmental protection. Is this always the case? I guess it's a leading question. We're hoping that you defy that.
Yeah, it's something that we've come across multiple times over the years. This question of, do we invest in the environment and sacrifice our bottom line, or do we, try and focus on growing our bottom line, and then hopefully we'll have enough profits to invest in the environmental protection. And it's a very interesting sort of dichotomy, because one actually leads to the other. And what we've noticed is that a lot of organizations that have an environmental management component, not because they're mandated to, but because it's a culture of their organization, it's something that they believe in, they believe in preserving or restoring the environment, tend to have higher profitability. And that largely stems from the higher employee engagement rates that they have, the higher employee retention rates that they receive, because their employees can believe in something that the company is actually doing. And at the same time, they get greater productivity because they have less sick days that their employees are taking. But also, not only just internally, but externally, the customers that they're supplying to believe in what the company is doing, and so they get more loyal customers as well.
Great. So those are win-win solutions that are not necessarily, trading off one for the other, right? Anyone else wants to add to anything that Rafiq added about the perception of the economic growth and environmental protection being mutually exclusive, and hoping that they're not?
Well, I really think if we were to look through this from the perspective or from the view of Indigenous people, and the worldview that we share is the concept of not siloing these topics, that our success as a people and our success as a human race is based on the inclusion of this. So I'm not Sean the economist or Sean the businessman, right? Part of my identity includes environmentalism. And I think that's where Canada and Canadians really need to shift is this isn't something that is just off to the side. And there doesn't have to be that sacrifice, that essentially they're one and the same. And we can, once we realize that or look at that from a holistic point of view, then society will be just that much better off. Once you care about the environment and business at the same level, you're going to see that they actually complement each other quite well.
Isn't that great? The duality of this is not really a duality, and it's in all of our interests as a human race to embrace it. Mike, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
I'd just like to add to that we have our climate goals. We're trying to hit a certain climate target by 2030, net zero by 2050. I think we need to look at every megaton that we're reducing as an economic opportunity. right? That every time we are transitioning to a new fuel source, every time we need to install a charging station for an electric vehicle, or we need to upgrade a hydro line, or all of the millions of little things that we're going to need to do to hit that 2050 target, that's an economic opportunity. And particularly as we get good at manufacturing those things, we can sell them around the world to help other countries hit their climate targets. So, in fact, I don't think that these are at odds at all. But we should again recognize that yes, this is a difficult challenge, and we don't want to sugarcoat that. There's a lot of work to be done, but there's a lot of work to be done, and that is an economic opportunity.
Well said. And I think, again, what we are hearing is let's leverage the opportunity, and instead of looking at sort of binomial ideas, let's actually look for win-win solutions. So let's shift gears a tiny bit. So the question is again to Mike and Kim, and of course feel free to jump in, the rest of the panelists as well. So let's talk a bit about childcare. What impact will affordable childcare have on those provinces who are implementing it? And I guess this is maybe a question indirectly directed to Ontario as well. Will it help alleviate the labor shortage? And what is the cost if childcare remains unaffordable for many families? And I'm particularly honored that Kim and Mike are both here and could address this. Thank you very much.
Well, I guess I can say. I mean, from a policy design perspective, we have this big advantage that we can look to Quebec, right? This is not something novel that we're doing, or provinces are looking at doing. So we have a whole 20, 25 years of experience to draw. And what I would point out is that in Quebec, 8 out of 10 women who have a child under the age of 3 are in the labor force. It's about 80%. In Ontario, it's 70%. So that's the gap that can get filled here. So and unfortunately, it is just being gender roles and sort of expectations are what they are. Is that it largely manifests itself through increased labor force participation for women. So absolutely, this creates, again, economic opportunities, allows young parents of young children to enter the labor force faster, which is good for them, but also obviously good for our firms that are looking for experienced workers. So absolutely, this can have, the Quebec experience shows that, there are some implementation challenges, and the Quebec system isn't perfect, but it comes with, vast economic benefits.
Thanks very much, Mike. I'll have a follow-up question, but I'll let Kim go first. Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, I just want to second everything that Mike just said. I entirely agree. The Quebec case is telling. Will it help to alleviate a labor shortage? It could help, right? Certainly not having to stress about childcare is going to make it easier for, as Mike pointed out, women and mothers in particular, to either return to work when they actually want to or enter the labor market for the first time. But if we think about the 3 biggest sectors where there are labor shortages, we're thinking here about the service industry, healthcare, and manufacturing. The other missing link to drawing in workers is better working conditions. So increasing minimum wage for servers is a really good start, right? That announcement just came out today. But the healthcare industry is obviously under crisis as well. So if childcare is certainly a huge important piece of the puzzle, but better working conditions is the other piece that's going to alleviate some of the labor shortages that we're seeing.
Great, those are great points, and that sort of leads me to my follow-up question, which is, again, recognizing we've heard at the first couple of panels about, wanting to make sure that Niagara remains competitive and that we are in this for the long game. So, it is becoming increasingly difficult for employers, to sort of bear the burden or so-called the cost of all of these. What would you say are win-win strategies, and who would it take to have these sort of affordable childcare strategies, and whose job will it be to sort of have this implemented? Is it a public-private partnership? Is it all hands on deck? What are the best solutions aside from what you mentioned in Quebec? What would it take for this to be an affordable and yet winning solution? Anyone else?
Well, I would imagine that what the federal government is trying to accomplish is something like the Quebec model, where it's a certain dollar, $10 or $8 or $15 a day childcare, with some of those spaces being in the public sector, early childhood centers. My French is terrible, so I'm not going to try and pronounce the French name of it. And some of that being offered by the private sector. Again, there are challenges to that model. One of the big challenges is labor force shortage in early childhood education itself. So in Quebec, we've seen waiting lists that are about 50,000 children long. So it's not a silver bullet, but the idea is it's a model where parents would get subsidized daycare. The government would cover the rest, but it's not a pure cost for the government, because those parents are re-entering the workforce. They're making our economy more productive, and they're paying taxes for themselves. So the overall cost to governments it's not zero, but it's fairly minimal, because again, we're recognizing we're getting more young parents back into the labor force, paying taxes, helping our company, and that helps fund those daycare subsidies.
Great. Thank you for that. So let's shift gears again. So this question is to Sean, and I just wanted to let you know this may be a bit triggering, but let's work with the question that we have. While there's more of a public appetite for truth and reconciliation, there's still confusion over what we can do. Are you able to speak to the economic issues that Indigenous individuals still face, and what we, meaning the Niagara's economic community, can do to help? Thanks.
Thank you, and I do appreciate the question. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission is very descriptive in its calls to action. And there are 94 recommendations for calls to action that have been put in place, and they focus on a lot of them with education, with government's responsibilities. But what's relevant here is the recommendation 57, which talks about professional development and training for public servants. And what that essentially is saying is it's calling for organizations to understand the history of Aboriginal people or Indigenous people. When I use the term Aboriginal people, understand that it's not politically acceptable to use it now, but at the time when this report was written, it was accepted to do so. But have the understanding of residential schools, because oftentimes residential schools are framed as products of the past. And while that might be true in the sense that the last residential school closed in 1996, there are still intergenerational effects that we know that plague Indigenous people. If you were never raised in an environment that taught you how to love, is it fair for you to assume that you as a caregiver know how to love, right? And if you move on down to number 92 of the calls to action, there's a specific section that addresses businesses and reconciliation itself. 92 essentially says that we call on the corporate sector in Canada to adopt the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People as a reconciliation framework and apply its principles, norms, and standards to corporate policy, core operational activities involving Indigenous people and their lands and resources. This would include, but not limited to, and it provides a couple subpoints to that. Knowing that the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, while has recently been adopted by the Canadian government, and it wasn't adopted in full fashion that it was originally written back in 2004. Canada was one of 4 nations that made the decision not to adopt that principle. And under the leadership of Prime Minister Stephen Harper, eventually did adopt that with a caveat. And then since then, under the current leadership of Justin Trudeau, has removed that caveat, and Canada, again, has been working to implement that. But it's really about understanding the dynamics on a local level that affect Indigenous people. Who are the Indigenous people in the community itself, right? Who are you seeing? Understanding that we are living in your communities, that the Niagara Regional Native Center is one of the largest urban service providers for Indigenous people, that they have a employment and training office that is located downtown in St. Catharines. So they provide services for Indigenous people from birth to essentially grave. And it's about partnering and utilizing those relationships that exist there, using them as subject matter experts to help work with your needs as a business or your needs as a community.
Okay, so it sounds to me that there's resources and workforce issues that are available. It's just a matter of seeking it out and making it a priority and responding to the TRC recommendations. Thanks. Go ahead.
Most definitely. I mean, one of the programs that does exist within the Niagara Regional Native Center is an employment and training program that offers training supports for individuals who are wanting to re-enter that workforce or maybe potentially do some upgrading or skill building within that workforce. So it's 50% of the wage subsidy. It's a 50% wage subsidy that could be covered for businesses who want to make a concentrated effort in bringing Indigenous people into their company. If you're a not-for-profit, it's around 90 to 100%. Again, there are these programs that do exist. What I think the core message that I want to bring across is that it's about partnership, taking the time to learn from one another, taking the time to know one another. I think a classic example of that is before this conference started, Rafiq had the fantastic idea of taking the time to introduce us to one another so we feel a little more comfortable. And when it's about business, it's as simple as that human interaction. We all learn from one another. So I think that same principle should be applied to how business is run.
Those are great ideas and suggestions. And I think, one takeaway that maybe we didn't have a chance to talk about is the idea of when we think about population growth or the availability of the so-called workforce shortages. When you look at the Indigenous population and in terms of your age ranges and medians, there's certainly opportunity to build bridges and to build better working relationships because there is opportunity to explore that as well. So let's again move on to another topic, and this one is for Mia. There's still a sense that to be more ethical, such as by paying a living wage, and in Niagara it was just announced yesterday, I think, or today, of the most recent living wage bracket, or being environmentally responsible, a business must compromise its bottom line. Is this always the case? And are there ways in which a business can be more ethical and doing as well or even better financially by embracing the living wage model? Go ahead, Mia.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the simple way I would put it is that ethics is actually great for business. I think an ethical culture really matters to the employees that you have, your investors, the communities that you serve. It just builds that healthy culture, right? It attracts better talent. It bolsters the bottom line is really my message here. So the organization that I work for, we've been named for the last 7 years among the world's most ethical companies, and we're in a financial institution setting, and trust is really important. And when I think about it, both from the perspective of the company that I work for, as well as the merchants and businesses that we serve, I put it into that context, right, around how the world's most ethical companies historically outperform their peers and competitors financially. It's really important to think about. It sounds like it's difficult. It sounds like it's expensive. I know there's concerns about the bottom line, but the reality is, those businesses that perform ethically demonstrate a tangible ROI when they're doing the right thing. And, there's a real connection between good ethical practices and financial performances of the companies that decide that they're going to perform in an ethical way. So Ethisphere is the organization that we work really closely with, and there's others out there, and they have something that they call a 5-year ethics premium. And when they measure a good amount of data over a 5-year period, that ethics premium, when you're an ethical organization and recognized for it, you outperform your peers in the same industry by about 7%. So it's really about, it's really core and it's measurable, right? It helps us make better decisions. And, the net of it is, that the how of it is, we make better decisions when we have different perspectives and different points of view and, thinking about things like psychological safety and the ability to talk about things. It just helps you as an organization to operate in a way that does positively impact your bottom line because you're being ethical.
Those are great considerations. What about ethics and sustainability? And when I look at around the screen, I find these would be subject matter experts on topics of ethics in all fields, but I'm particularly thinking of Rafiq and also Kim, in childcare and sustainability, and to a lot of extent even for Sean, because these are indigenous principles, right? They're not divorced or unrelated to every industry that could benefit from it. Anyone else? Maybe Rafiq, do you have any thoughts on ethics and sustainability?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Mia presented a very good perspective on ethics in business and how it affects the bottom line. When we talk about sustainability, most people think that it's about the environmental impact only, but there is the social and the economic impacts as well. And part of that is how you treat other organizations, how you treat your own employees, and how you perceive yourself in the community. Are you creating that larger impact, not just for your own bottom line, but for the greater good? And so the ethics and sustainability are all integrated. It's all part of exactly what we do in sustainability.
Oh, that's great, and it's a great add-on to what the earlier panel members in the second panel were talking about, people being our greatest asset, and how treating people and putting people at the center is the most important element, because it does make business sense, but it also makes ethical and social sense. So the next question is to Mike. What is the role of the state in providing public goods, such as transit and housing, so that the effective living wage for a community is reduced?
So it's a great question, because there's two ways that you can improve sort of the financial well-being of families. Either have them have more money or reduce their cost of living. And housing and transit put together are about 50% of the average family's budget. So if you look at what a family spends, about half of that goes to housing and transit. The lower the income, that's sort of higher proportion of that. And if we look sort of across Canada, there are big differences in sort of the amount that people have to spend in housing. So Montreal, the average family spends about $16,000. In Ottawa, it's about $19,500, and in Toronto, it's about $24,500. So that's a big difference. We're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars each month, just each year, just due to housing, let alone transit. So there's absolutely a role that governments can play to reduce those costs. Some of them are, obviously just providing more housing and transit, but others are allowing more housing to be built on transit lines. So, one thing that Montreal does particularly well is that sort of missing middle of homes, having 3 and 4 story homes, or 3 or 4, story multiple units along transit lines. And what that does is, first of all, it reduces the cost of that housing, particularly when affordable units are built. But also, it's a lot of those individuals on the transit line don't need a car, or they certainly don't need a second car. So you're reducing both housing costs and transit costs at the same time. And I think this is something worth looking at. Looking at, first of all, again, how can we create more affordable housing units? But secondly, how can we create that missing middle along transit lines? So we are not necessarily even increasing the amount of transit we're providing. We're just allowing people to live closer to that pre-existing transit to allow them to get to work opportunities.
Okay, so those certainly are a couple of policy tools that could be explored further and implemented as fast as possible. So thank you for that. The next question is for Mia. For those businesses who want to be more ethical but don't know how to start, are there easy things that can be done?
Absolutely. I think it's perhaps people think it's more complicated than it is. I think it, simply put, it starts with the leaders in the organization and creating the environment. There's quite a few easy places to start here, and it begins with listening, right? I think you have to start by asking yourself, what do you need to do in your business to create an environment where you can innovate, you can move quickly, you can ideate, and be more inclusive in that process. Really demonstrate a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Create that true culture that you need to be able, to start to be good at this. It just comes down to a really simple concept that I strongly believe we really make better decisions when we have multiple perspectives and multiple points of view. So, when I look at our own organization and how we've thought about this over time, I think we recognized it can be really easy to say that we want to encourage employees to speak up, right? You might go into your organization and say, our employees believe in this. They should just, state what they're thinking. But I think you got to kind of turn that conversation around a little bit, right? Our chief ethics officer talks about it really well. She talks about having a listen up culture. It can be really easy to say employees should speak up, but why don't they, right? They might have a couple of concerns, right? Reporting something that they're thinking, they might be, fearful of reporting it. They might think it's futile to report it. And there's something called psychological safety that I think is really, if you're conscious of it, you can really implement it within your organization. It's just creating that environment where people feel like it's safe to speak up, offer a new idea, come up with a challenge or concern or something that is different than the status quo in the organization. And I know for us, we practice it every day. It's not difficult to do. You just have to be conscious and do it with intent. I think, without doing it, you don't get the benefit of those other points of view. And it's why I think it's so important and such an easy thing to start to implement within your own organizations is, how do you create an environment where people feel comfortable sharing those ideas, sharing those thoughts, challenging the status quo, as I say. So, I think for all employees, for the communities that we serve, it just enhances our commitment to what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish when we create an environment like this.
Those are great points. And again, it's not big, gigantic steps. It's the little things, and it always starts with people, with listening more and putting people first. Just looking at a time check, we have about 12 minutes left. And I have a few more questions, and we're going to dig a little deeper into the so-called DEI question. But before I ask the question, I just have a quick quote. So Mahatma Gandhi said that our ability to reach unity in diversity will be both the beauty and the test of civilization. And I think, if looking back the last 19, 20 months, I think it's very evident that it is both the beauty and the test of our civilization, of what is going on, what is important, and what should remain important for us as a civilization. So this question is to all, so feel free to jump in. The question is, does embracing equity, diversity, and inclusion help businesses do better? Again, I think to me it's a no-brainer, but I don't want to lead your question, but I do. What are the benefits to a diverse workforce and a diverse governance? How do we articulate this to a greater audience who's just getting to know that? Who would like to start first? Kim, how about you? Let me pick on you now.
Sure, no problem. He has already highlighted the fact that research does indeed demonstrate that having racial, ethnic diversity and gender diversity and diversity across many lines of difference on teams, on governance boards, leads to better outcomes in terms of innovation. So in terms of innovative products and also innovative problem solving. Companies that have more than 30% women on their executive teams are more likely to perform better. They outperform those companies that have 30% or less women on their teams. I could go on. The stats are out there. But two other things I want to raise that accompanies all this conversation about the value of diversity in companies and its pursuit. The first thing is that tends to get glossed over when we have these conversations is that incorporating diversity and inclusivity is actually really hard, and it's not devoid of conflict. In fact, you're going to see an increase in conflict because what you're doing is oftentimes, having that gender or racial ethnic diversity means that you're bringing together people that come from different cultural communities that have different mindsets. So they're going to approach problems differently. And that's going to lead to conflict, but that's part of the process, right? Nothing, as I always tell my kids, nothing worth having is easy. So this takes a lot of hard work when we go about doing this work. The other thing that I think it's important to recognize is that if we focus solely on the kind of return on investment that diversity brings to companies, what's going to happen is that we risk having this be a conversation more about compliance and less about creating that inclusive company culture that Mia is talking about. And so pursuit of diversity has to go hand in hand with building a very inclusive company that is open to disagreement, respectful disagreement.
Absolutely. It's those critical, crucial, difficult conversations. Rafiq.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in and kind of build off of what Kim was saying just now. One aspect that is extremely important in inclusion, diversity, and equity is also the inclusion of accessibility. We need to make people feel like they can be heard and provide them with that platform. They need to have the accessibility to that platform to be able to speak their mind, which I think is extremely important. It's not just the physical accessibility, but also the intellectual and social accessibility to be able to present a potential problem or a solution. And it's that conversation that really needs to take place. And one of the things that we really work on with businesses is engaging as many different perspectives as possible. So it's not just about engaging with your employees or your stakeholders, your shareholders, your board members. It's also about the suppliers, the vendors, the customers, the community, really trying to get that holistic perspective so that you know exactly what it is that is being perceived and what is being received. And so we focus on creating that diversity through a sustainability committee with businesses. But there's also one other very interesting perspective that an analogy, if you will, that someone from the space station was kind of looking down from Earth, and on the space station it circles the globe once every 20 minutes, and they were really missing home because they felt this void, like being out in space. There's nothing around, and they want to at least wave to home. And as they were circling the globe, they couldn't find their home. And so they circled once, twice, 3 times, and they finally pulled out a map and said, all right, I can locate it on the map. Where is it on the globe? They looked down, they still couldn't find it. What they realized is that they were orienting themselves to these lines on a piece of paper, but there were no lines on the earth. And so what we fail to realize is that across borders, it's all invisible lines. And this is where this conversation needs to take place, that we shouldn't be segregating ourselves based on gender, identity, religion, race, nationality, that we are all part of planet Earth, that we are all humans here, and that engaging in these conversations, having these different perspectives from these different people from all walks of life, really help to build what we're trying to accomplish at the end of the day, which is prosperity for everyone.
Those are great thoughts and points. And we have about 7 minutes left, and I want to give some prominence to Sean, because I think this is a great segue also to, again, this may be a difficult conversation from an Indigenous perspective, but embracing the idea of equity and diversity, and how making sure that we always look out for who's not at the table, right? Who's left out, who's left behind. And I think that there are some really amazing and age-old principles from our Indigenous community that we can take on. So do you want to take a few minutes and talk to us about your thoughts and ideas on EDI from an Indigenous perspective, Sean?
Yeah, 100%. And thank you for the time. I really do appreciate it. Equity, diversity, and inclusion is very much not an easy subject or not a very simple topic to address and to bring forward into a community. I think it was Kim who said that. Understand that there is going to be difficulties, but this is an investment on your business, right? This isn't, if we were to compare this to stocks, this isn't us investing in Apple and us investing in Facebook and all that stuff. This is us participating in that stock market, right? And in reality, the people that we bring in represent those stocks that we want to invest in. And simply because one stock doesn't work doesn't mean that you should stop using or stop subscribing to equity, inclusion, and diversity. What we know collectively is that there is value. Everybody brings a certain value. Everybody brings logic. Everybody brings a certain worldview that is different than mine. Despite me working in equity, inclusion, and diversity, I can guarantee you the perspective I'm going to bring is going to be very much different than Nia and very much different than Rafiq. And it's the magic happens when we start coming together and having that time to talk, to understand and get to know one another. Is that's it, right? Because it's about creating an appropriate work culture, right? This should never be a top-down approach. There should always, and it's funny that I say top-down. There shouldn't be even a hierarchy in that regard. This is what we know is that people don't quit their bosses. People don't quit the jobs. They quit their bosses, right? That is a foundational knowledge that anybody who's been into business or more specifically human resources understands. So if we give the people, the employees, the opportunity to speak their minds, to be more inclusive, that's really where you're going to see the magic happen. It's really going to be where you see the connections that are going to be made, right? If you think back to high school, right, one of the best techniques or one of the best things that the teacher could do is to put us into groups and to brainstorm as a collective. Because when I think of something, that might trigger Mia, and then that might trigger Rafiq, and then might trigger Mike, and all of a sudden my old idea of how to, I don't know, build something is now inclusive of 5 different people with 5 different perspectives and 5 different voices. And one of the things that we say in Indigenous cultures is that one arrow is good, but a bushel of arrows is better, right? There's that strength within numbers. So I think that speaks to the importance of diversity, inclusion, and equity. And we need to focus on equity too, because there are people who have been pushed out of the market. There are people who have been told that they do not need to participate. And when we want to be a successful business, going back to the earlier discussions of childcare, unfortunately is usually on the burden of women. So when we put in childcare in place to make it more affordable for families, what we're essentially doing is making it more affordable for women to enter the workforce. And that is what equity looks like. And you giving me the opportunity to address this question is another example of equity. So thank you for that.
No problem, my pleasure. So we're about at a 1 minute mark. There's 5 of you, so I'll give you each 20 seconds to give me your elevator speech about what would you like Niagara to take away from this panel. Let's start with Mike. What are the biggest messages that you want Niagara to know about our ethical future?
Absolutely. I think Niagara is well positioned for the challenges of the future when we look at climate change and the need to feed a growing planet. So in order to meet those challenges, we're going to need the contributions of everyone. The more we can sort of figure out how to incorporate everyone's abilities and desires and thoughts into these challenges, the better off we're all going to be.
Great, thank you. Kim?
That's a hard one to sum up so quickly. I guess I would just say that what we need to do as a region and as employers is ask our employees what they need to bring their best selves to work. What maybe it's flexible work hours, maybe for the many kind of offshore migrant workers we have on the farms here, it could be improving their working conditions. Just turn to those with whom you work in your communities and ask what we can do to improve our our immediate working conditions.
Great, thanks, Kim. So Rafiq, Mia, and Sean, 2 words each.
I'm going to do 3 words.
3 words, Rafiq.
Purpose, perspective, prosperity.
Beautiful.
Understand what you're doing, engage with everyone, and do it for the greater good.
Thank you. Mia.
I'll say get started, and remember it takes 10,000 hours of practice to get good at something, so just get started.
Great, thank you. And last but absolutely not least, Sean.
Think outside of the box. Go to places that you would not go, eat food that you traditionally wouldn't eat, partner with people that you traditionally wouldn't partner. Oftentimes, again, we get siloed into things that I like. The Polish community, the Finnish community, this is where I live, this is where I breathe, which is fantastic. It's good to have these cultural traditions. But it's also good to experience other people, make use of things like the Folk Arts Center, the Niagara Regional Native Center, the Greek community, all these organizations that live within Niagara, that define Niagara, make them as useful as possible to you.
Great. Thank you very much. I thank you all for your time and for your indulgence to stay a couple of minutes beyond. Thank you very much. And I wanted to say thanks to the GNCC and specifically to Mishka and her team for a great 2021 Niagara Economic Summit. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you to this wonderful panel and for today's discussion. It is so deeply appreciated. And the same, actually, thanks go to all the panel discussions that have taken place today. So thank you. But today's discussion won't stop here. Each year, we have made a commitment to you to take the suggestions and opportunities that were identified at past summits to the next level. And today would not be possible without the generous support of our title sponsors and our sponsors overall, the Niagara Region Economic Development, Goodman School of Business, Brock University, RBC, Niagara College, Hatch, Deloitte, KPMG, Innovate Niagara, National Bank Financial, BDC, TD, Meridian Credit Union, Lancaster Brooks & Welch, Virch Insurance, Niagara 2022 Canada Games, Move 105.7 and Newstalk 610 CKTB. And a big, huge thank you to Niagara College's broadcasting, radio, television and film team of students, faculty and alumni. You simply rock. And to my GNCC colleagues, Danielle Babineau, Emma Cabana, Hugo Cheshire, Brad Demers, Stephanie Farr, Beth Fletcher, Karina Massacott and Savannah Sturt. It is an honor to actually work with you. And to each and every one of you who has actually spent the last couple of hours with us. Again, our thanks and our commitment to you individually and personally to actually take the suggestions that have been made here today, the ideas, and to make them a reality for Niagara. So thank you and have a good day.